Does the moon disappear when you look away? Einstein wasn't asking this question as a joke. He was challenging the very nature of reality. The man who revolutionized our understanding of time and space believed that the universe exists independently of observers. But his debates with Bohr opened a crack in the foundation of physics that hasn't closed to this day. Why did the genius who gave us the theory of relativity reject quantum mechanics? What drove him to search for a unified theory for 3 decades straight? And was he right? In this video, we'll break down to atoms the teachings and philosophy of the great scientist Einstein. Get comfortable, my friend. We're beginning this fascinating journey. But first, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Part 1. To really get Einstein and his take on knowledge, you need to wrap your head around his unique perspective. It's crucial because it shapes why he stuck to certain scientific ideas and tossed aside others that his peers thought were obvious. At the heart of Einstein's way of figuring things out is a strong skepticism about what we perceive directly. From a young age, Einstein questioned whether our senses truly reflect the world as it is. He grasped that what seems solid is actually mostly empty space. Smooth movements are just a bunch of tiny particles in action, and things that appear to happen simultaneously might not sync up for someone moving at a different speed. Einstein called himself a realist. He figured that the universe does its own thing regardless of whether anyone's watching. Sounds like straightforward logic, right? But some folks took issue with this view, especially in the realm of quantum physics. Einstein was convinced that objects had definite characteristics, whether anyone observed them or not. A tree falling makes noise, observers or none. The moon remains in the sky, even if no one's checking it out, a point he often debated with Niels Bohr, a big name in quantum mechanics. Now, here's the twist. Einstein's realism wasn't just naive acceptance of what we see. He reckoned that we don't perceive reality directly. Instead, we create mental models, what he called free creations of the human mind, and test these ideas by comparing them to what we observe. Imagine looking through tiny windows from a locked room, trying to figure out if there's a parade outside. You might guess correctly, maybe even usefully, but you can never be sure, as you aren't outside witnessing the parade firsthand. Einstein's metaphor captures how he viewed scientific knowledge, fantastic constructs rather than perfect copies of reality. Math isn't just lying around in the universe like undiscovered treasure. People invented it to help make sense of the world. What's wild, as Einstein put it, is the miracle of these made-up systems being great at predicting how nature behaves. This mix of ideas led Einstein to lean towards critical rationalism with a hint of empiricism. Rationalism revolves around using reason and logic to figure stuff out, while empiricism draws from our sensory and observational experiences. Einstein fused them, but he valued reason more. He thought groundbreaking theories didn't come from stacking up data. They originated from creative, intuitive, and logical thought processes. Take special relativity in 1905. He didn't base it on new experiments or an avalanche of data. Instead, he imagined chasing a light beam, something he thought about as a teen. This imagination revealed inconsistencies in the physics of his day. Through pure thinking, Einstein devised theories about time and space that later experiments backed up. The big takeaway? Einstein suggested that there can be different theories fitting the same evidence. Think like a detective. Sometimes the clues can point to various culprits. Similarly, the same experimental results might support multiple theories about the universe. So, choosing between theories isn't just a matter of matching them to observations. They require a bit more. It involves judging factors like simplicity, elegance, cohesion, and explanatory power. Einstein was particularly keen on a few qualities in theories. Simplicity was a big one. He believed theories should be as simple as possible without sacrificing key details. Then there's unification. A good theory should bring different phenomena together under common principles. And crucially, it must be logically consistent, with no contradictions allowed. Einstein had this idea about a sort of inner beauty in theories. They should feel like they naturally fall into place without seeming forced. He also believed they needed to really dig into the why rather than just skim over the what. These ideas were at the heart of some intense debates Einstein had back in the day. Quantum mechanics showed up and rocked the boat with things like randomness and reality being up to the observer, and Einstein wasn't buying it. It wasn't because quantum mechanics didn't work. It was actually spot on with predictions. But it bumped heads with Einstein's beliefs. For him, a solid theory should be predictable, with clear cause and effect. It also needed to be realistic, not changing just because someone is observing it, and should stick to the slow and steady speed limit of light without any warp speed surprises. This tells us a lot about how Einstein operated. He wasn't just taking evidence at face value. He was mixing in philosophy to sort through theories and get to the heart of the matter, even if they didn't fully match the evidence back then. He truly believed that the core of understanding nature had to be something we could wrap our heads around logically. If a theory seemed all over the place with mysteries that didn't make sense, Einstein figured it was probably just a step along the way, not the final destination. Of course, Einstein's take on things came with its pros and cons. On the plus side, it sparked some revolutionary ideas. By trusting reason more than just stacking up data, he turned the world of Newtonian physics on its head, despite its strong evidence backing. He looked beyond mere observations. But this approach also had its pitfalls. Sometimes it made him ignore real advancements. Like with quantum mechanics, it's been tried and true for nearly 100 years, but Einstein's discomfort with it was more about his own perspective than actual universal truths. Still today, people are chewing over whether Einstein's way of digging into knowledge holds up. Some argue he was led more by aesthetic preferences than any foolproof path to truth. Why should the universe be simple, after all? And why should our math conveniently fit the cosmos like a glove? Nobody's got a solid answer to that yet. On the flip side, some folks back Einstein's style, saying that traits like simplicity and unity have sparked big scientific breakthroughs in the past. Progress often comes when we leap beyond the data staring us in the face. You can see Einstein's footprint in the current chase for a unifying theory of everything. Today's physicists exploring things like string theory or loop quantum gravity often lean on Einstein-like reasoning, pushing elegance and unity to the forefront. But critics warn that without concrete evidence, those elegant qualities might lead them astray. This ongoing discussion essentially continues Einstein's pondering on how we figure out what we understand and what standards we should use to weigh different ideas about our universe. Part 2. All right, here's the scoop. Before Einstein came onto the scene, people were kind of set in their ways about time and space. I mean, they clung to these ideas for millennia. Up until 1905, everyone figured time was this constant thing, ticking away the same no matter where you were. A minute on Earth matched up perfectly with a minute up on Jupiter or any spot in the universe. And space? Well, it was seen as this massive, unchanging backdrop where the universe did its thing. Everyone just assumed these were self-evident truths. Then, boom! Einstein showed up and turned all that upside down. It all kicked off with what seemed like a straightforward question. What do we actually mean when we say two things happen at the same time? Picture a train zooming by a platform. Now, imagine lightning hitting both ends of the train at what seems to be the same exact moment to someone standing on the platform. But wait, if you're sitting in the train right in its center, things change a bit because the train's moving. You're getting closer to one lightning strike while moving away from the other, so you'd see the bolt hitting in front of you first. So, who's got it right? Before Einstein, folks would have just crunched the numbers on how long it takes for light to travel and declared they'd nailed down true simultaneity. But Einstein tossed in a curveball, asking a deeper question. What exactly are you using to make that calculation? Turns out, it's a mess, because you'd need synchronized clocks and a solid idea of what being simultaneous even means across vast distances. Einstein worked out that simultaneity isn't this fixed thing. It shifts around depending on who's watching and how they're moving. What seems simultaneous to one person might not line up that way for someone else on the move. It's not just an illusion or mistake. There's no ultimate way of seeing things. Everybody's version of events is spot on for them based on how they're moving. This idea was a serious shake-up for how we usually think about time. Most of us believe there's this universal now that's everywhere all at once. But Einstein busted that wide open. There's no single now you can point to across the cosmos. Everyone carves up the universe into past, present, and future in their own way, and every one of those perspectives is legit. What you consider the present here on Earth doesn't match up with any particular moment somewhere out on a distant star. And then you start questioning cause and effect, right? We're used to the idea that one thing leads to another. A switch flipped makes a bulb light up. But if simultaneity is relative, could someone see the light go on before the switch gets flipped? Einstein put our minds at ease a bit by showing that for events that could influence one another, everyone agrees on the sequence. If event A can cause event B, everyone says A comes first. However, if events are so far apart that they're out of each other's influence, like further than light could reach in that time, people might see the order differently. These events don't follow one objective timeline, and it gets wilder. Time and space? They're tied into one entity. Newton's take had time as this inexorable march forward, while space was the place you moved around in. But with Einstein, we got this four-dimensional space-time deal. As we move through space, we're basically weaving our path in space-time, trading how much we cover in time for how much we cover in space. It's all pretty mind-blowing. Picture this. Alice and Bob are twins. Alice jumps into a spaceship, blasts off towards a distant star at 90% the speed of light, does her thing, and eventually heads home. Bob, meanwhile, stays on Earth. When Alice gets back, she might have only aged about 5 years, leaving Bob scratching his head. Bob, who's now joined the Golden Club at 50, gives us a walkthrough of the popular yet not so paradoxical twin paradox. Picture this. Alice, speeding through the cosmos, ends up spending a lot more time on her space journey than ticking seconds off her watch. It's pretty much like she's traveling in less actual time. This stuff isn't just sci-fi fodder. Physicists have put the whole time dilation thing to the test over and over. They've discovered that atomic clocks flying aboard planes run just a bit slower than their counterparts that stayed on good old Earth, perfectly lining up with Einstein's relativity theory. And those muons high above in the atmosphere, if going by their usual lifespan, they should disappear long before hitting the ground. But because they're racing close to light speed, from our perspective, time's dragging its feet for them, allowing them to reach Earth's surface before fading away. This science has a huge impact on how we think about time. In a way, we're all time travelers, moving into the future at varied speeds depending on how fast we're going and the gravity we're dealing with. Take the astronauts hanging out on the International Space Station, for instance. They actually age just a smidge slower than us down on Earth because they're cruising faster and dealing with less gravity. It's minimal, mere milliseconds over months, but still, it counts. Bottom line, your route through space-time dictates how you experience time's passage. And then there was Einstein's big 1915 breakthrough, general relativity, which threw even more weirdness our way. Gravity got tangled up with geometry. Huge cosmic objects bend and warp space-time. So, planets orbit stars not because they're being pulled, but because the stars are twisting space-time, guiding planets along seemingly straight, but actually curved paths. Turns out, gravity is all about the geometry. Thinkers have debated what space is all about for ages. Was it a tangible thing like Newton thought, or merely a relationship among things as Leibniz argued? Einstein came in with a mixture of both. Space-time has its own unique traits. It can curve, send out ripples, and carry gravitational waves, not just organize matter. John Wheeler nailed it, saying, "Space-time tells matter how to move, and matter tells space-time how to curve." To philosophers, this is structural realism, where space-time's reality is its dynamic geometric relations, not just a static backdrop. General relativity ushers in mind-blowing possibilities that flip our everyday understanding. Consider black holes. They're areas where space-time stretched beyond breaking, and even light can't escape. The event horizon is the line you cross at your peril. Near a black hole, time behaves bizarrely. Someone watching an astronaut heading toward one would see them slow until almost halting as they near the horizon. But for the astronaut, they'd think they crossed the event horizon swiftly, rushing headlong to the singularity where all bets are off and our equations go kaput. So who's right? Both perspectives are correct in their own frames of reference. That's relativity at its most intense. And if that doesn't twist your mind enough, general relativity also teases with solutions allowing time to loop on itself, known as closed time-like curves. These curves make time travel to the past possible. Kurt Gödel, Einstein's Princeton buddy, found these curious solutions. In Gödel's topsy-turvy universe, if you boarded a spaceship and navigated the perfect course, you could return to Earth before you even set out. Picture this, getting a chance to meet the younger version of yourself and having a handshake. This concept gave Einstein the creeps because it seemed to jumble up the expected flow of cause and effect and opened up a can of logical worms. Like, picture going back in time and stopping your younger self from jumping onto a spaceship. Such thoughts made it seem like Gödel's math solutions, despite being spot on in theory, might not really fit with how our universe operates. Maybe there are laws in nature that nip these time loops in the bud. That's what scientists dub the chronology protection conjecture. Fast forward to today, the conversation is still going strong. Some experts reckon that quantum mechanics, with its insistence on consistency, would naturally iron out these time travel paradoxes. Meanwhile, others are big on the idea of parallel universes or the many worlds theory as an explanation. And some think that at a certain fundamental level, unknown scientific principles make time travel a no-go. These discussions show just how much Einstein's relativity has evolved our understanding of time, turning it into something that begs scientific exploration rather than just philosophical chatter. This change stresses the importance of intertwining science with the quest to grasp the core of reality, a central theme in metaphysics. But not everyone bought into Einstein's ideas. Henry Bergson, a philosopher from around the same time, believed Einstein was mixing up mathematical time with the time we actually experience. Bergson split them into two: clock time, tackled by physics, and subjective duration, which we feel within our consciousness. Sure, physics could show a moving clock ticking slower, but that didn't capture the essence of time as we feel it. Einstein waved off Bergson's arguments, maintaining that our experience of time eventually ties back to physical time. Still, Bergson was touching on a critical issue. Can physics disclose everything about reality, or are there parts of our conscious experience that it can't quite grasp? This question is still very relevant in the philosophy of mind debates today. There's also a hitch with how relativity deals with determinism. Both special and general relativity suggest that if you have all the facts about the universe at one moment, you can predict what's happening at any other time, whether it's past or future. This raises tough questions about free will and accountability. If everything's already set by past conditions, how can we genuinely be responsible for our choices? Einstein was aware of this sticky point, but was fine with determinism. We'll dive into his musings on free will later, but for now, just know that relativity's determinism hinges on having complete initial data and nailing the equations perfectly, which we can't actually achieve in practice. Plus, general relativity has singularities where determinism falls apart, and when you mix it with quantum mechanics, things get downright unpredictable. On an even deeper front, relativity shakes up how we think about identity over time. If every object is a four-dimensional entity stretched across time, what makes you at 10 the same as you at 50? Before relativity, philosophers could argue you're the same because you live as a continuous, three-dimensional being through time. But now you're considered a four-dimensional thing, with distinct moments in time being as separate as different places in space. This challenges traditional notions of identity and continuity over time. Philosophers have hashed out various theories to tackle this. The perdurance idea sees you as a four-dimensional entity, with your younger and older selves being just different time slices of you. The endurance view attempts to hold on to the notion of you being a continuous three-dimensional being despite how space-time is structured. Neither view is entirely satisfactory, so the debate rolls on in metaphysical circles. Einstein really flipped the script on how we think of scientific explanations. Before his time, physics was all about figuring out which forces and causes were working their magic over time. Rather than sticking to the usual drill of wondering what exactly is pulling the planets around in their orbits, general relativity takes a different approach. It dives into how space-time is shaped and structured around a big, heavy star. This moves us away from a simple cause and effect mindset to one that focuses on geometry. Some folks think this is a big leap forward in our understanding, while others worry we might be missing the point. Is saying that gravity is just a matter of geometry really explaining it? Or are we just putting fancy words to describe it in a new way? When we talk about massive objects bending space-time, how is that actually happening? Einstein gave us equations that tell us how much space-time will curve when there's a certain amount of mass and energy around, but they don't explain why mass and energy have that effect. Here is where we see the limits of Einstein's revolutionary ideas. His theory of relativity gave us a new way to think about time, space, and gravity. But it still runs into trouble at the tiny quantum level and at singularities. It's not much help when it comes to what's happening inside a black hole or right after the Big Bang. It doesn't entertain the thought that space and time might work more like tiny pixels rather than a smooth canvas, hinted at by quantum mechanics. Researchers are on the hunt for a theory that blends quantum mechanics and gravity into one master theory, much like relativity took over from Newton's perspective. This search includes concepts like string theory, loop quantum gravity, and causal set theory. However, all these theories are still in the early stages, struggling with tough math and lacking strong evidence. The pursuit of a unified theory was a huge part of what Einstein dreamed of, and we're still on that journey, which we'll explore more in Part 6. Einstein's impact is massive today, influencing modern physics and philosophy to their core. In 2015, when gravitational waves were confirmed, exactly 100 years after Einstein said they should exist, it celebrated his geometric view of gravity. These waves, which happen after massive collisions in space, proved that space-time is not just an idea, but something real and dynamic. Still, quantum mechanics keeps challenging the classical confidence relativity offers. The idea of quantum entanglement, where particles seem to connect over distances instantly, clashes with the relativity idea that nothing can travel faster than light. Bringing together quantum mechanics and general relativity is the biggest puzzle for physicists today. Einstein's groundbreaking ideas about relativity are still waiting to be fully tied together with the quantum discoveries he kick-started but never quite wrapped his head around. Part 3. Einstein's relationship with quantum mechanics is quite a puzzler in the science world. Back in 1905, he laid down some serious groundwork for what we later understood as quantum theory by demonstrating that light isn't just a wave. It behaves like little bits of energy dubbed quanta. This breakthrough got him the Nobel Prize, but for the next 3 decades, he argued that the version of quantum mechanics developed by folks like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg didn't quite cut it when explaining how nature really works. The thing that bugged him wasn't the math. It was more about the deep philosophical implications. To really get into this, we need to understand what quantum mechanics says about the world. In regular physics, including Einstein's relativity, things in the universe have definite characteristics whether we're looking at them or not. A particle, for example, has a specific place and speed at any given moment, regardless of whether we measure it. Our measurements just reveal what's already there. But quantum mechanics flips this idea on its head. According to the Copenhagen interpretation brought to life by Bohr and Heisenberg, particles only gain definitive properties upon measurement. Before we measure them, particles aren't committed to being in any one spot or state. They're in a superposition, science jargon for being in all possible states at once. It's not just about us not knowing where it is, it literally exists as a blend of all options. The moment you measure it, bam, it settles into one particular state, but which one is revealed purely by chance. It's akin to throwing dice, but on a cosmic scale, with the universe tossing the dice. This randomness really got under Einstein's skin. Things came to a head in 1935 when Einstein teamed up with Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen for a groundbreaking paper known as the EPR paper. They crafted a thought experiment, which David Bohm later sharpened, to point out potential gaps in quantum mechanics. Imagine two particles interacting and then speeding away from each other in opposite directions. In the quantum realm, they remain entangled, meaning their properties stay linked no matter how far apart they are. Measure one particle's spin, a kind of quantum twist, and instantly you know the other's spin, even if they're galaxies apart. If you measure one and it's spin up, the other's got to be spin down. The Copenhagen crowd claims the first particle didn't have a set spin until you took that measurement. It was in both spin-up and spin-down states at the same time, and measuring it forced it into one state, affecting its distant twin and forcing it into the opposite state. This idea seems at odds with Einstein's relativity, which insists nothing can zoom across space faster than light. Einstein just couldn't buy into this. He thought there had to be a more logical explanation. Perhaps both particles had their spins sorted out right from the start when they went their separate ways. Measuring one only reveals what was already settled, without any of that faster-than-light funny business. This idea suggested there were hidden variables, extra factors beyond what current quantum mechanics lays out, that determine the results of measurements. Einstein believed quantum mechanics only dishes out probabilities because it's an incomplete puzzle, missing those hidden variables. He figured that a future, more complete theory would tidy up the randomness and bring back some determinism. The EPR argument was pretty convincing. Fast forward to 1964, when physicist John Bell tossed a game-changing theorem into the mix. Bell highlighted that if you use a framework based on local hidden variables, secret elements that don't violate light speed rules, you run into specific mathematical constraints called inequalities. Quantum mechanics flips the script by challenging a set of guidelines called Bell's inequalities. This game-changer opened doors for tests to figure out what's really happening. By taking careful measurements of entangled particles, scientists aim to verify if the results matched Bell's rules or contradicted them, just as quantum mechanics predicted. Back in the 1970s, researchers started ramping up their efforts, conducting increasingly sophisticated experiments. Time and time again, they got results that didn't sit well with Bell's inequalities, but matched up with quantum mechanics like a charm. These earth-shattering findings eventually nabbed a Nobel Prize in 2022 and set off hefty philosophical discussions. The experiments debunked Einstein's preferred notion that particles have predefined traits decided by hidden local factors, unveiling instead that nature operates with connections that defy physical proximity, where measuring one particle instantly affects its distant buddy. Still, before you think the Copenhagen interpretation gets a full triumph, hold your horses. Bell's theorem underscores that any theory syncing with quantum outcomes must push past traditional boundaries. It's got to either involve super light speed action or claim particles lack definite traits until checked out, or maybe even a mix of both. This has led to a split among scientists and philosophers about which theory to back. Some want to rescue determinism by embracing non-local links. For example, Bohm came up with a hidden variable theory where particles always know their place, steered by a strange quantum wave that darts instantly across space. Bohm's concept aligns with quantum predictions and retains Einstein's views on realism and determinism, but embraces non-locality, pushing against Einstein's idea that nothing whizzes faster than light. Meanwhile, other theories are cool with unpredictability, but stick to locality. Take Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation from 1957. It suggests the wave function never fades. Instead, each measurement causes reality to branch into countless parallel universes, each one playing out a different possible outcome. So, in one universe, you might find a particle as spin-up, while in another, your counterpart finds it as spin-down. Although it may sound like this theory creates a super complex multiverse just to avoid randomness, it adheres to the mathematics of quantum mechanics without adding any extra stuff or hidden assumptions. Physicist David Deutsch even claims it's more straightforward than it seems, because it assumes less. Another path, known as cubism, treats quantum mechanics as a way to interpret what we know or believe about measurements, rather than depicting reality itself. In this view, the wave function is subjective, a mirror of our knowledge, and collapses occur as we update what we know, not due to any real-world change. This perspective allows for different observers to see different versions of a system based on what they know. Einstein wouldn't have been thrilled with any of these ideas. Bohm's deterministic theory embraces non-locality, which wasn't Einstein's cup of tea. The many worlds take unnecessarily multiplies realities and isn't testable, while cubism shifts quantum mechanics to focus more on knowledge rather than reality. None of these perspectives align with Einstein's core beliefs in realism, locality, determinism, and objectivity. At its core, this debate dives into what scientific theories should clarify. Einstein believed that basic theories should offer a genuine picture of reality, independent of observers or measurements. Quantum mechanics, as most interpretations suggest, focuses on observations and the observers themselves. It tells the story of what happens during measurements, but stays mum about what exists when no one's observing. Einstein had this notion that simply seeing theories as tools for predictions was too shallow. He believed that physics should dive deep into revealing the true nature of things, not just focus on how we interact with them. Now, during those famous debates, Einstein put Bohr on the spot with a tricky question. Do you honestly think the moon isn't there if no one's looking at it? Bohr's response was that such questions miss the core point of quantum mechanics. In his view, you can't really talk about reality without incorporating measurements, because measurements and the systems they observe are intertwined. The classical ideas we have, like pinpointing positions and figuring out speeds, only apply to specific experiments. So, Einstein's idea of discussing reality without measurement wasn't meaningful to Bohr because his principle of complementarity suggested that understanding something fully requires looking at it through different, seemingly conflicting lenses. For instance, light behaves as a wave in some contexts and as a particle in others, not because it changes, but because our perspective shifts depending on how we measure it. Einstein didn't buy into Bohr's perspective. He believed Bohr was drifting away from seeking concrete, objective truths and settling for interpretations based on human experiences. To him, physics was becoming a study of appearances, which frustrated him as he saw it as abandoning the pursuit of a deeper understanding of existence. This debate still buzzes in the philosophy of physics today. Some folks think Einstein's hunt for unchanging reality hangs on to old ways. They argue science should focus on describing observable phenomena and predicting outcomes without diving into whether or not something truly exists beyond observation. This viewpoint, called scientific anti-realism, has been around and even shaped the early thoughts of a young Einstein until he shifted perspectives. On the flip side, some folks back Einstein's realism. They argue science thrives when it uncovers truths about invisible things, like atoms or electrons, considering them real entities rather than mathematical constructs. They believe that focusing solely on observable phenomena can leave out the why behind those observations. This discussion even extends to modern quantum technologies, like quantum computers and cryptography, which lean on quantum mechanics oddities to achieve incredible feats. These technologies thrive despite debates over the theory's roots. So, does this imply that probing quantum mechanics' base is a waste? Einstein would have likely said no. He'd argue that just because something functions well, like how Newton's physics once did, it doesn't mean it's the ultimate. Just like relativity highlighted Newtonian physics limits, there might be a more accurate theory out there that unites determinism and realism beyond quantum mechanics. We're finding new puzzles thanks to cutting-edge experiments these days. Research into quantum gravity is hinting that space and time might actually be born from deeper, quantum-level information structures. Then there's the wild world of black holes, showing unexpected connections between quantum physics, thermodynamics, and gravity. Connections that no one's fully made sense of yet. These big, overarching mysteries might eventually need the kind of unified theory Einstein dreamed of. A hot topic right now is the measurement problem in quantum mechanics. This problem is still baffling. How and why does the wave function collapse when you measure it? The theory says it collapses, but it doesn't tell us why. Different interpretations of quantum mechanics offer varying answers. The many worlds view, for instance, suggests the collapse doesn't actually happen, while other theories propose new physics to tackle the collapse mystery. From early on, Einstein had issues with quantum mechanics. He felt the way measurement was handled seemed a bit forced and not quite right. There's also this ongoing dilemma about how quantum mechanics links up with time. In standard quantum mechanics, time is an external element, not like other properties such as position or momentum that can be measured quantum mechanically. This idea doesn't mesh well with general relativity, where time and space are intertwined in a kind of space-time fabric, and your experience of time changes with your speed. Merging these concepts, quantum mechanics and relativistic time, remains a big challenge, and might require us to rethink the basics of both theories. Einstein also didn't like the randomness in quantum mechanics, feeling it was a major downside. Today, people in philosophy talk about two kinds of unpredictability: ontological and epistemic. Ontological unpredictability means the future is genuinely not fixed, while epistemic unpredictability is about our inability to predict future events due to incomplete knowledge. Take chaos theory, for example. It's epistemic because tiny changes can drastically affect outcomes, but it's still based on initial conditions. But with quantum mechanics, it's like the future's genuinely undecided until you measure. Einstein worried this might mess with our understanding of cause and effect. If things happen without specific causes, how can we truly comprehend nature? But those who support quantum indeterminism believe Einstein confused determinism with our ability to understand. They claim nature can still be logically understood and mathematically described, even if it's inherently unpredictable. Quantum mechanics gives exact probabilities, and maybe that's as deep as our understanding can go. So, here's the big question. What makes an explanation thorough enough? Einstein wanted certainty. Knowing the cause means knowing the effect. Quantum mechanics gives us probabilities. Under these conditions, certain outcomes occur to certain extents. Is that a real explanation or just a way to describe things? This debate is still alive. Some find that using probabilities makes sense. Even in everyday life, we rely on probabilities. Take smoking and cancer. It's not about certainty, but likelihood. Others think explanations based on chance aren't enough and should eventually be traced back to solid reasons, even if we haven't figured them out yet. Einstein had a unique approach to science that heavily influenced his views. He was all about finding unified, clear-cut explanations, which worked wonders for his discoveries in relativity. But when he applied this same method to quantum mechanics, it didn't really get him anywhere. His approach seemed to fit some areas better than others, and quantum mechanics was not one of them. There's more at play here than just science. If the unpredictable nature of quantum mechanics is true, it could mean we have free will in a world otherwise dominated by cause and effect. Some folks think this randomness might allow our brains to make genuine choices instead of everything being predestined. Others argue that randomness isn't the same as free will, which should involve decision-making and intention rather than chance. Einstein disagreed with the idea that unpredictability could save free will. He thought free will and determinism could coexist. His critics of quantum mechanics weren't really about free will. He was pushing for physics to describe a logical and understandable universe. This debate also highlights the tension between mathematical elegance and real-world evidence. The math behind quantum mechanics is beautifully structured, and its predictions have held up to rigorous testing. Despite being around for nearly 100 years, the core ideas of quantum mechanics still spark debate and confusion. Should we just accept this, or strive for the clarity and elegance that Einstein sought? This issue isn't just about quantum mechanics, but is also relevant to modern theoretical physics fields like string theory and quantum gravity. These areas showcase impressive mathematics but lack solid experimental support. Some critics see a repeat of quantum mechanics' focus on complex math over clear understanding, while supporters point out that Einstein himself used mathematical elegance to anticipate relativity even before experimental confirmation. Einstein's role in the world of quantum theory is still somewhat mysterious. He was wrong about some things, like hidden variables and the completeness of quantum mechanics. He also didn't bring determinism back without sacrificing locality. Yet, he was spot on in recognizing that quantum mechanics presents profound conceptual challenges. He thought physics should strive for an objective view of reality and emphasize foundational questions beyond just practical applications. Most importantly, Einstein showed that philosophical ideals can guide scientific breakthroughs. His criticisms weren't just objections to new ideas. They were carefully reasoned critiques with clear criteria for acceptable theories. Even when incorrect, his challenges clarified the stakes and nudged the field toward deeper understanding. Without his EPR thought experiment provoking thought, the experimental work on Bell's theorem might not have happened. Discussions on quantum mechanics continue to evolve, with new interpretations regularly emerging. Modern experimental techniques are now testing ideas that were once purely theoretical. Quantum information theory has shifted focus from just particles and waves to information and connections. These advances could eventually lead to the clarity that Einstein sought, or they might reveal that quantum's peculiarities are simply fundamental to how reality works. Part 4. Einstein's view on religion was a lot more complex and nuanced than what most folks realized, both when he was around and even after he was gone. He wasn't buying into the idea of a personal God who meddles in our everyday lives, hears prayers, or dishes out rewards and punishments. Yet, he mentioned God a lot, which puzzled religious folks who either tried to claim him as their own or atheists who simply brushed him off. To really get what Einstein was talking about when he said God, you need to dive into his connection with the ideas of Baruch Spinoza, a philosopher from the 1600s. Spinoza, a Jewish-Dutch thinker, had a pretty radical view on God. Normally, people see God and the world as separate, with God being some super being who kicked off the universe and can tweak natural laws. But Spinoza shook things up by saying God and nature are one and the same. For him, there wasn't any separate supernatural realm. He saw God not as a feeling, thinking entity keeping a to-do list, but as the whole universe following unchangeable, rational laws. Everything is part of God, and events happen naturally because of God's essence, just like one math theory logically following another. Ideas about free will, miracles, and divine retribution. Spinoza thought those were just misunderstandings because we're missing the full picture. During Spinoza's time, linking God and nature as one was a big deal, and it got him labeled an atheist. He was kicked out of the Jewish community, and his works were banned by the church. But his ideas hugely influenced the Enlightenment and later intellectuals, including Einstein. When young Einstein stumbled upon Spinoza's writings, they resonated with his views on science and philosophy. He'd often mention that he was religious in a Spinoza-like way. If someone asked if he believed in God, he'd say he believed in Spinoza's God, a force seen in the universe's rules and beauty, not a God who directly intervenes in human affairs. Einstein's belief often expressed itself as what he called cosmic religious feeling, which he saw as the deepest emotion possible. It's the feeling of connection to something grand and beautiful, just out of our reach. Thinking about the structured universe and how human reasoning can make sense of it all sparked a sense of wonder and admiration in him. This awe for the universe's workings was what religion meant to Einstein. To him, science was almost like an act of devotion. Understanding the universe's laws felt like deciphering God's design. He was amazed at how the universe seemed to follow comprehensible math rules. It blew his mind that the human mind, evolved mainly for survival, could break down complex stuff like quantum theory or relativity. This struck him as a miracle, the eternal mystery that the universe is understandable to us. The rational structure of nature was God to Einstein. But unlike traditional religions portraying God as a person full of love or judgment who occasionally steps into the fray, Einstein's God was purely the logical order of existence. Einstein was really against the idea of a God with human qualities, a God who gets mad or jealous, or who rewards or punishes based on actions, seemed childish to him. He thought these ideas were just people projecting their human traits onto God, stemming more from fear or the need for comfort than real understanding. This view meant Einstein didn't quite fit into any organized religion, as big ones like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam describe a God involved with the world, invested in human actions, and who listens to individuals. Einstein often saw religion as mere superstition, although he didn't broadcast this view widely. In personal exchanges, he remarked, "The term God is just a way to cover human weaknesses. The Bible is an ancient collection of fairly straightforward tales." Nevertheless, he didn't refer to himself as an atheist. He made a clear distinction between dismissing the idea of a personal God and rejecting a broader sense of cosmic spirituality. Einstein felt atheism was too focused on what it denied instead of contemplating the wonder and logic of the universe. He described his beliefs as agnosticism flavored with Spinoza's pantheism. His views on religion frequently stirred public debate. Believers were offended by his dismissal of a God who actively manages the universe, while atheists didn't appreciate his use of religious terms. In a 1929 interview, when asked if he believed in God, Einstein said, "I believe in Spinoza's God," which led to much misinterpretation as an endorsement of traditional religious beliefs. This statement prompted many curious letters from believers. In response to one, Einstein clarified, saying, "I don't believe in a personal God, and I haven't kept it a secret. I've been open about it." He further explained, "The part of me that might be called religious is a profound respect for how the universe is structured, as revealed by science." The tension between Einstein's cosmic spirituality and organized religion highlights broader questions about the role of religion. Classical religions provide comfort, ethics, community, rituals, and answers to big life questions like the nature of suffering or the afterlife. However, Einstein's religious view offers none of this. It's more about mentally and visually grasping nature. Critics say Einstein's version isn't truly religion. It's more like science dressed up with religious language. They argue that true religion involves connecting with the divine, worship, prayer, and beliefs that transcend logic. According to them, Einstein's approach strips religion down, leaving only admiration for the universe. They question why call it religion when it seems more like philosophical naturalism. Supporters of Einstein argue that he tapped into the core of religious experience, a sense of encountering something far greater than ourselves that inspires awe and humility. Traditional religions often humanize this experience, attributing human characteristics to the divine. Einstein's cosmic religion maintains this core experience but removes the human traits. He even claimed that cosmic spirituality represents the pinnacle of religious development. He outlined stages of religious evolution. First is the fear-based stage, driven by a need for protection from nature's forces, leading early humans to worship things like storms and fertility. The next stage, moral religion, sees God as a judge or lawmaker, rewarding and punishing humans. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam fit this mold. Lastly, cosmic religion transcends fear and morality, focusing instead on the marvel of existence. Einstein believed humanity should progress from moral religion to cosmic religion, as moral religion can lead to dangerous fanaticism. Believers may think they're enacting God's plan and could impose it on others, often causing conflict. By contrast, cosmic religion avoids such risks by finding the divine in the impersonal laws of nature rather than human affairs. Einstein's idea of religious evolution has been criticized for being elitist. Essentially, he suggested that his philosophical perspective represented a mature understanding of religion, implying that those who hold traditional beliefs are stuck at more primitive stages. Some folks knock this idea for dismissing the real deep faith experiences of billions of people, as if they're somehow childish or lacking. They also argue it ignores how religion shapes society and gets into people's heads, by only zeroing in on the beliefs part. Einstein's cosmic religion idea also hits some bumps in the philosophical road. If you start saying God and nature are one and nature's all about those set-in-stone laws, then you're saying everything, suffering, evil, the whole shebang, is just part of God's plan. It ends up making God responsible for every single thing, good or bad. Classic theology squares up to evil by suggesting God's got reasons, and humans have the freedom to make choices, hinting that suffering might come from those choices or could fit into a bigger, divine picture. But in Einstein's take, God isn't about having goals, and people don't have freedom, which puts evil down to just how nature rolls, leaving a bit of a moral void. Einstein saw the problem, but couldn't solve it. He owned up that the issue of evil was a real head-scratcher for him, and he never landed on a satisfying answer. Sure, a bit of suffering helps evolution do its thing, making species better through survival of the fittest. But heaps of suffering seems pretty useless and just too over the top. If the universe is supposedly all logical, why is there so much randomness, like cruelty and waste? Typical explanations, the fancy word is theodicy, usually pin it on free will or say God's plans are just too big-brained for us. Einstein tossed both of these notions aside. He didn't vibe with free will in the usual sense, which we'll dig into more later, and he thought playing the God's mysterious plan card was dodging the real question. That left him with a big question mark over evil in his worldview. Another puzzle is whether cosmic religion actually gets people to act right. Classic religions have their methods, promises of a heavenly reward, or threats of fiery damnation, or guiding folks through a connection with a caring deity, spelling out moral codes. Einstein's cosmic religion doesn't dish out those kinds of motivations. Why would just appreciating the universe's neat math make someone choose kindness? Einstein figured that feeling in tune with the cosmos naturally nudges people toward good deeds, since it deflates the ego and grows humility. Getting how tiny we are in the vast expanse makes personal cravings seem pretty petty. We start viewing ourselves as a piece of a bigger puzzle instead of just being caught up in our own little dramas. This could build empathy and push us to care about others, but this doesn't win everyone over. Plenty of scientists feel wowed by the universe without necessarily kicking up their ethical game. And many folks grounded in traditional faiths lead moral lives without needing cosmic goosebumps. Einstein's linking of nature contemplation with doing good might seem more like a happy accident than a solid connection. Einstein's stance on religion also colored his thoughts on Zionism and Judaism. Even though he wasn't super religious, he felt a strong cultural and ethical bond to Judaism. He backed the idea of a Jewish homeland in Palestine as part of the Zionist cause, but was wary of it becoming a religious state and worried Israel might lean too much into theocracy. He pushed for Arabs and Jews to work together and favored a binational solution instead of a purely Jewish one. This vision lined up with his broader take on religion, which favored universal human value and rational thinking worldwide over local loyalties and narrow religious customs. For Einstein, the heart of Judaism was its focus on ethics and intellectual traditions rather than any special divine status or claims to sacred territory. Even today, Einstein's religious perspectives continue to fuel discussions about how science and faith fit together. Some folks say that science and religion don't mix because science is all about explaining things through natural causes, whereas religion deals with the supernatural side of things. Others think that science and religion are dealing with completely different stuff. Science is about how the world works, and religion is concerned with questions of meaning and ethics. Then there's Einstein, who kind of combines these views by saying that science can have a religious flavor if you think of religion in a broader sense. He doesn't like the idea of keeping the universe's structure separate from its religious significance. He figures it's not just us humans giving the universe meaning. We're tapping into something inherently spiritual. Today's physics has added layers to this. Instead of solving the mysteries that got Einstein's cosmic sense all fired up, it's made them even more intense. We're living in a universe that burst into existence nearly 14 billion years ago and just keeps expanding. Why do we have a universe anyway? Why not absolute nothingness? And how come the physical constants are just perfect for life to emerge? These are the timeless questions that pop up now in the guise of modern cosmology, echoing ancient theological debates. Some scientists talk about a multiverse, where there might be countless other universes, each with its unique set of rules. In that context, a universe like ours, capable of supporting life, is just one of those inevitable outcomes. On the other hand, some folks see this fine-tuning as evidence of design or purpose behind everything. Einstein, if he were around, would likely shrug off both these theories. He'd see the multiverse as just guesswork without evidence and consider the design idea too centered on us humans. But even so, these debates stir the religious curiosity to dig for ultimate truths, something very close to Einstein's heart. Central to Einstein's spiritual perspective was the belief that the universe is something we can wrap our heads around through reason. While he couldn't prove it technically, and despite quantum mechanics challenging it, he clung to it as a core belief, a pillar in his cosmic spirituality. Science, after all, stands on the belief that the natural world is something human intelligence can untangle. This raises another question. Is Einstein's cosmic religion actually religious, or is it just philosophy wearing religious clothing. It hinges on what you think religion means. If you see religion as needing supernatural beliefs, a personal deity, rituals, and moral laws, Einstein's view doesn't match. But if being religious means approaching life's big mysteries with awe, reverence, and a pursuit of truth beyond personal interests, then Einstein had his religious streak. What mattered to Einstein was more about the way you engage with big questions rather than the labels you give to it. The key takeaway is the sense of being part of something far bigger than yourself, something that inspires awe, demands serious reflection, and is both beautiful and challenging. Whether you call it religion or philosophy doesn't change its role in fueling Einstein's work and shaping his thoughts on ethics. It's one way, perhaps the most intellectually elevated way, humanity has sought to find meaning while gazing into the vastness of the universe. Part 5. So, when Einstein came up with relativity, it wasn't just a game changer for science. It flipped our whole understanding of time on its head. This wasn't just an issue for scientists. It got philosophers and anyone pondering the meaning of life thinking hard. If relativity really holds up, then our gut feelings about how time works are way off base. The way we picture the past, present, and future could be totally different from how we've always thought. One biggie that relativity brought to the table is the block universe theory, also called eternalism by philosophers. Imagine that every single moment, your birth, this very second you're reading this, and everything after, are all sitting together in a kind of four-dimensional space-time block. Basically, nothing new gets created and nothing disappears. It all just hangs there at its own time-stamped spot. Now, this block universe idea doesn't sit well with presentism. Most of us think in terms of presentism, where the only thing that's real is what's happening right now. The past is done and dusted, and the future hasn't shown up yet. It's a comforting way to see the world, but relativity messes with it, showing that right now isn't the same for everyone. What you think is happening right this minute might be different for someone who's moving differently through space. If we can't all agree on what's now, how can we say it's the only reality? Hilary Putnam, a deep thinker of a philosopher, dug into this problem. Picture two people moving apart, each with a different view of what's happening now. If real means right now, then you both end up living in different realities, which sounds pretty far-fetched. Reality shouldn't depend on your motion, nudging us back toward the idea of a block universe where all times coexist. Even Einstein seemed to lean this way, although he wasn't always super clear about it. When his buddy Michel Besso died in 1955, Einstein comforted Besso's family in a note, saying that for physics believers, the divide between past, present, and future is a tough illusion to ditch. This kind of suggests that Einstein was thinking along the lines of the block universe, which doesn't make the present all that special. The philosophical fallout from this is massive. If the future's already hanging out there, it feels like it's set in stone, impossible to change. Everything you expect to happen seems like it's already out there, waiting in line. That kind of makes it look like we have no say in what's coming up, right? Fans of the block universe argue that just because something exists doesn't mean it's unchangeable. Your decisions have their own spots in space-time just like anything else. Just because your choice is parked at a certain spot doesn't mean it was locked in by past events. The block universe doesn't necessarily mean that life is like clockwork. It still leaves room for free will. Critics of the block universe still aren't convinced, saying it tosses out the idea of real change. Change, they argue, needs something new to show up. In a block universe, nothing new ever appears. We're used to feeling time flow, like the present is steadily moving from past to future, but the block universe says that's just an illusion. So, why do we get this sense of time flowing if reality is more like a photo album frozen in time? Why do we feel like we're moving through this block of time instead of being stretched across it all from the get-go? It's a tricky puzzle, and philosophers have thrown a lot of theories into the ring. But no one's hit the nail on the head just yet. Some folks think consciousness itself needs us to experience life in sequence. That's because our brains take time to process things. Whenever you pull up a memory, it's like hitting the replay button, making it seem like time is trotting along. Okay, so check it out. We all see time as a one-way street, always going from the past to the future, right? We don't see time flipping backward or things happening out of order. This whole forward-moving time thing, known as the arrow of time, is pretty mind-boggling. If you dive into the tiny world of physics, laws don't really care about time's direction. They're totally flexible and work the same both ways. Imagine watching a film of little particles doing their dance. Play it backward, and it still looks okay. But when it comes to our lives, that's a whole different story. We only remember what's already happened, but can't recall the future. We can make decisions about what lies ahead, but changing the past? No chance. You never see an egg fixing itself after breaking, or people growing younger. This one-way ride is all wrapped up in thermodynamics, which is all about heat and energy. There's organized stuff eventually gets chaotic, but chaos doesn't randomly become orderly on its own. Like ice naturally melts into water, but water won't freeze into ice unless something steps in to help. This increase in entropy is what gives us that arrow of time. The past was more orderly with lower entropy. And the future. That's where disorder grows, with higher entropy. Our memories tick forward because making memories adds order in our brains, but increases entropy elsewhere, following this time arrow. But it makes us wonder, why did the universe start with such low entropy? Back when the Big Bang happened, everything was super organized, and since then, entropy has been on the rise, letting us experience time's one-way trip. What's the deal with that? Feels like there's something special about how things started, and it's not fully explained. Even though Einstein's theory of relativity gives us a cool way to think about all this stuff, it doesn't solve the entropy mystery. Relativity explains the shape of space and time and how gravity fits in, but it doesn't say why entropy should keep going up. Honestly, time's direction is still one of those big unsolved puzzles in physics. And here's something else that's fascinating, how we feel the now. It's not just a blip. It kind of stretches over a few seconds, like a specious present, where the recent past and near future blur together. Neuroscience tells us this is because our brains are busy piecing together info over time. They take sensory inputs coming in at different times, compare those to recent memories, and make guesses about what might happen next. This gives us that feeling of living in the moment, but while that explains how we experience time, it doesn't dive into what time is, physically speaking. Philosopher Adolf Grünbaum pointed out that this specious present idea implies that time's flow is something our brains invent. Physically, time might just be a bunch of split-second moments, and the flow we feel only happens in our heads as our brain processes things in bits. We don't really travel through time. Instead, our awareness pops up in different time slices, recalling what just happened. Yet, some folks say time must truly pass because change needs time to happen. To them, for something to move from point A to point B, it has to pass through spaces in order, proving change is real, not just our imagination. These debates even tie into mind-twisting parts of quantum mechanics, like the measurement problem, which makes us want to dig deeper into understanding what time really is. When exactly does that mysterious quantum wave function snap into reality? Is there an exact point when it takes place? The confusion grows when we think about how relativity tells us there's no absolute way to measure time. Some scientists claim it's our consciousness that makes this collapse happen, meaning the flow of time matters a lot in quantum land. On the other hand, there are those who believe collapses are just fairy tales, and instead they favor the many worlds approach, where a block universe holds all possible quantum outcomes. Einstein, for his part, didn't get too involved in these deep debates about mind and time. He saw the present more as a matter of perspective than anything grounded in absolute truth, and thought the block universe idea wasn't far-fetched. But he didn't spend much energy trying to connect the dots between subjective time experiences and how physics fits into them. Now, here comes physicist Lee Smolin, stirring the pot by questioning this whole block universe notion. He argues that time isn't just some background character, but the main star. Smolin is convinced that treating time like it's no different from space is where physics took a wrong turn. For him, only the now is real, and everything is constantly changing. He thinks the uncertainty we see in quantum mechanics is proof that the future doesn't exist until it pans out, being an open book yet to be written. Smolin's stance rallies around presentism, challenging relativity's eternal, timeless universe. If quantum results don't solidify till they happen, then the future can't be pre-existing as a part of a block universe. This block universe idea spins around determinism, or that all possible paths are laid out with no surprises. But if the future is open-ended, then only now is real, making a case against the block universe. Still, not everyone jumps onto Smolin's train of thought. Critics say the block universe can still hang out with indeterminism. Even if future quantum events haven't been planned by the past, they can exist in their own space-time slots. They argue that randomness doesn't automatically support presentism. Plus, the evidence supporting the eternal outlook from relativity is pretty solid, and Smolin's ideas have a tough time fitting in with relativity's successful track record. It's all a big reminder of how Einstein's work exploded larger-than-life questions. He took the concept of time, something we all thought we understood, and turned it into a profound puzzle that calls for deep thinking. Almost a century later, scientists and philosophers are still wrestling over what time actually is and whether our sense of time passing means anything out there in the universe. Time's tricky nature also raises big questions about personal identity and dying. If the block universe is the real deal, technically you never really vanish. Your life just sits there permanently in its little slice of space-time. Death would be like hitting the end of your journey through space-time, which is your existence. but all those earlier slices of your life stay put, like old destinations you've visited that remain even after you've moved on. Some people find a silver lining here, thinking it takes away death's sting a bit if our lives are permanently etched into this block universe. Others aren't as convinced, since what really seems to matter is our ongoing conscious experiences, which cease with death. Whether our lives linger timelessly in the universe feels disconnected from our personal perspective on what it means to face the end. Einstein had a unique approach to death, considering his view of the universe as a timeless block. He wasn't relying on religious beliefs about an afterlife and dealt with the concept of death with a kind of calmness and peace that's not very common. He saw us as fleeting parts of a vast universe, much like waves that rise and fall while the ocean stays the same. People might come and go, but the universe just keeps on rolling. This way of thinking gave him comfort about dying without needing supernatural explanations. Yet, it's unsure if most people can find this perspective comforting on an emotional level. Einstein had this rare mix of profound intellectual insight and an extraordinary ability to keep his emotions at a distance. Some folks might find looking at death from a cosmic perspective calming, while others might not feel the same. Today, the big puzzle in physics is trying to crack quantum gravity, a theory that's meant to merge quantum mechanics with general relativity. There are theories suggesting that time might not be as fundamental as we think. Instead, it could be something that comes about. Maybe time doesn't exist in the deepest sense, and it's just these timeless quantum states at the core. It's through poorly understood quantum processes that time emerges at a larger scale. If time does arise from somewhere deeper, it might resolve many of today's confusions. Asking what time truly is might be similar to trying to understand temperature. Just like temperature arises from the motion of molecules but isn't a fundamental property, time might originate from a different foundation. Our queries about time's flow or the uniqueness of the present could be more about our perception rather than reality itself. Though these ideas are still debated and haven't been proven by experiments, they illustrate how Einstein's revolutionary thoughts continue to spark new avenues of inquiry and introduce fresh questions in theoretical physics. Time, which seemed straightforward before Einstein, has turned into one of physics' biggest enigmas. Despite our regular use of time, we still struggle to define its nature or understand if it truly flows, or if the present moment holds any objective reality. Part 6. For the last 30 years of his life, Einstein was all about finding a theory of everything. He set his sights on creating a unified field theory to neatly bundle up all the fundamental forces into one set of mathematical rules. Unfortunately, he never quite cracked the code. Many in the science realm believed he was wasting his incredible talents on this dream. But still, his big ambitions had a huge impact on modern physics and sparked important discussions about what we're really after when we seek scientific explanations. Einstein had a gift for tying things together, leading to his biggest breakthroughs. Take special relativity, which linked space and time and gave us the idea of space-time. Then there was general relativity, which mixed gravity with the shape of the universe. For him, merging things that seem unrelated was the real deal. It wasn't just some mathematical magic. It spoke to a deeper understanding if different things could share common ground. Fast forward to the 1920s, and physics recognized four basic forces: gravity, that pulls masses to each other; electromagnetism, that deals with electric charges and magnets; the strong nuclear force holding atomic nuclei together; and the weak nuclear force, which handles radioactive decay. Einstein had this idea to show these were all part of some giant field. He focused first on gravity and electromagnetism, which were the best understood forces of his time. With general relativity's geometry approach, he wondered if electromagnetism might be another geometric twist in space-time, maybe involving twists or extra dimensions. Over more than 3 decades, he'd tried out loads of mathematical ideas. He'd come up with a theory, dive deep into it, share some exciting findings, and then abandon it when issues popped up. Fellow scientists joined him for a while, but usually backed off when they realized Einstein wasn't budging on his views about quantum mechanics. He was convinced a proper unified theory should be deterministic and classical, in contrast to the unpredictability and probabilities of quantum mechanics, a belief that ultimately led to his project's downfall. By the 1930s, it was clear that quantum mechanics was key to understanding atoms, molecules, and light. The electromagnetic force was inextricably linked to quantum mechanics, so ignoring it just couldn't be part of any unified theory. Even though Einstein knew this, he never gave up his philosophical stance against quantum mechanics. He saw it as incomplete and believed a more deterministic approach would eventually replace it. His grand unified theory was meant to be that replacement, showing that quantum behavior might emerge from deeper classical principles. But the plan fizzled. His theories didn't make testable predictions and usually unraveled upon closer inspection. Meanwhile, quantum mechanics kept scoring win after win, leading physics to new places Einstein just didn't explore. So, why did he persist despite facing failure and becoming somewhat isolated in the scientific community? A few reasons. First, his monumental early successes in science probably made him trust his intuition. He had revolutionized physics twice by following his own path rather than the mainstream. So why not try a third time? Second, his philosophical beliefs just didn't gel with quantum mechanics. If quantum mechanics was here to stay, he preferred working on something that was more predictable and didn't rely on an observer to influence outcomes. Third, he deeply believed in the interconnectedness of our universe. To him, the universe seemed incredibly orderly and understandable, suggesting that different phenomena should have one common explanation. Einstein had a thing for aesthetics and couldn't quite vibe with quantum mechanics, thinking it was all over the place with its randomness and obsession with measurement. He totally believed math held the key to cracking the secrets of the universe. To him, the best theories shouldn't just hit the nail on the head. They should have a sort of beautiful simplicity that seemed destined to be. Einstein's ideas on unified field theories were captivating, even if they didn't churn out solid predictions. He banked on the hope that diving into mathematical patterns would unearth some profound truths about how everything works. This approach was right up his alley, given his past successes and philosophical bent. But that's when things started to take a detour. By mid-20th century, physics had moved ahead to a realm where getting your hands dirty with experimental data and quantum mechanics was the norm, not just taking educated guesses based on mathematical pondering. A lot of physicists today scratch their heads over Einstein's later works and wonder why he wasted so much brain power on something that seemed doomed from the start. Why didn't he realize that quantum mechanics was more than a fleeting trend? These questions can miss the essence of taking gutsy leaps in science and sticking to one's philosophical values. Einstein could have played it safe, contributing tweaks and additions within mainstream physics where his contributions would have been respected but not revolutionary. Instead, he doubled down on something he felt was groundbreaking, despite the long odds. His gamble may not have paid off, but maybe trying was its own reward. Even though he didn't nail unification, the path he carved out set the stage for some major breakthroughs in modern physics. Take the standard model of particle physics we use today, for instance. It ropes together electromagnetism and the weak and strong nuclear forces with quantum field theory, echoing Einstein's intuition that unification was achievable and worth pursuing, even if that meant making peace with quantum mechanics instead of brushing it aside. Still, gravity's the odd one out, hanging out in Einstein's general relativity, a classical theory that doesn't mesh well with quantum mechanics when you push it to its extremes. Physicists are still chasing that dream of a theory of everything that Einstein held on to. There are a few promising theories in play now. String theory, for example, turns the idea of particles on its head, seeing them as tiny, vibrating strings. The buzz these strings create lines up with different particles and forces. This theory naturally slots gravity into the picture and hints at bringing all forces together under quantum rules. But there's a catch. It calls for more spatial dimensions than we can currently detect and hasn't cooked up any concrete testable predictions yet. On the flip side, quantum gravity explores a different angle. It breaks down the concept of space-time, suggesting it's not smooth, but jagged at its tiniest scale. While this can iron out some headaches in quantum gravity, getting the other forces in tow is still tricky. Neither line of thought is straightforward. Both face steep hurdles. Despite years of contemplation, there's still no experimental proof backing them up. They're complex puzzles needing a lot of assumptions about stuff unobserved by us. Some folks argue these theories echo Einstein's slip-up, chasing mathematical beauty and unity without tangible backing from the world around us. Philosopher Nancy Cartwright has stirred the pot by suggesting physics doesn't naturally gravitate toward unified laws. Instead, she sees it as a patchwork of specific theories, each shining in its own domain without really melding into one universal framework. The whole idea of striving for complete unity in science might be more of a philosophical wish than a realistic scientific goal. Supporters of unification, however, point to history as proof. Over time, there have been successful mergers in science. Newton brought together the heavens and the earth. Maxwell combined electricity and magnetism. Einstein linked space and time, and then gravity with geometry and the Standard Model unified three fundamental forces. So, why should our quest for deeper understanding stop now? Cartwright throws a wrench into the conversation by questioning whether these so-called unifications are genuinely real or just mathematical patterns that happen to repeat across different phenomena. Take electricity and magnetism, for example. Just because they can be described using the same math, does that mean they are fundamentally identical? Or does it just mean our math is flexible enough to apply to both. This philosophical debate fuels discussions around string theory and other attempts at unification. Are physicists truly discovering nature's inherent unity, or are they simply applying a layer of mathematical consistency that's more convenient than truthful? If you asked Einstein, he'd probably argue that unification is indeed real. He believed the universe already works together in perfect harmony at its core, and physics' role is to uncover this harmony. For him, mathematical frameworks weren't just tools. They were rough representations of nature's true design. Yet, some might say, Einstein's own journey contradicts his belief. His efforts on unified field theories, while mathematically impressive, didn't have the physical evidence to back them up. They showed that fancy math without evidence is like a ship without a compass. It doesn't lead anywhere. It's a bit like what's happening with string theory today. Mathematically, it's elegant and suggests a unifying thread through everything, but it lacks testable predictions that can distinguish it from other theories. Some scientists worry that string theory has become more about mathematical creativity, reminiscent of Einstein's later work. This raises a bigger question. What are we really trying to achieve with scientific explanations? Should we aim for an all-encompassing theory of everything, a mathematical key that unlocks all cosmic mysteries? Or should we be satisfied with theories that work within certain boundaries without claiming to be the ultimate truth? Einstein was a true believer in the former, a definitive theory. He was convinced that, fundamentally, the universe should be understandable by human reason, even if we haven't found that final theory yet. This belief drove his relentless pursuit of unification and gave his work purpose, despite numerous setbacks. But was Einstein's dream a bit naive? Maybe his vision of ultimate unity isn't warranted. Perhaps reality doesn't fit into a single framework, or different areas of physics need distinct approaches with no common ground. Or maybe unification is real, but too complex for our minds to grasp, much like a dog trying to understand relativity. These possibilities challenge the Enlightenment idea, which Einstein personified, that human intellect can eventually explain everything. If there are limits to our understanding, then Einstein's quest wasn't merely a failure. It might have been a misguided endeavor from the start. If Einstein were around today, he'd probably tell us that giving up without a proper shot would be a mistake. Yeah, we might not ever get a handle on everything, but we won't know for sure unless we keep pushing our limits. It makes sense to strive for unification until we hit a genuine roadblock that we just can't get past. There's real value in that kind of approach. Even if we never get the whole picture, the journey alone is worth it because it teaches us so much. Look at Einstein's attempts at unified theories. They didn't succeed, but they showed future scientists where not to go wrong. The same can be said for string theory or loop quantum gravity. Even if they don't crack the code, they help us understand more about the tricky business of quantum gravity. One thing Einstein's search for unification showed us is how important experiments are in developing theories. He often had his big breakthroughs thanks to thinking deeply and playing around with math before any data was there to back him up. This style led him to create theories without needing experimental evidence right away. It worked brilliantly for relativity, but not so much for unification, which got some folks questioning the science approach. When is it smart to chase wild theories without concrete experimental evidence? And when do you decide it's time to call it quits? Einstein's adventures in science suggest there's no one-size-fits-all answer for these queries. Sometimes a wild guess can hit the jackpot, while other times it's just a shot in the dark. Figuring out whether your speculation is going somewhere or a dead end is tough. Maybe it depends on whether those guesses have a hint of connection to what we can actually see or experience. Think about special and general relativity. They were theory-driven yet tackled real-life puzzles like how light acts and the true nature of gravity. But Einstein's unified field theories? Not so much. They were grounded more in math, hoping reality would catch up eventually. Today's efforts to fuse different theories face similar challenges. Take string theory as an example. It began by addressing real issues like quantum gravity and black holes, but has now evolved into an enormous mathematical universe without easy experimental tests. Critics say it's drifted away from experiments that connect to real experience, while advocates argue that the questions it tackles are so profound, we simply don't have the tools to test them yet. They claim that theory must illuminate what experiments to undertake in the future. Einstein's drive to find unification encourages deep thinking about the path science should take in addressing its most colossal questions. Generally, science comes up with ideas, puts them to the test, and then keeps or scraps them depending on the results. But when we're talking about theories that aim to explain everything in the universe, the usual methods hit a snag. You can't exactly set up a lab experiment that encompasses the whole universe. So, we need new standards, like making sure things are mathematically sound, explain well, link different disciplines, or lead to predictions, even if we can only test them in the future. Einstein was all about these principles throughout his work. They sometimes panned out and sometimes didn't. We're still on the lookout for reliable ways to judge pure theoretical physics efforts. Part 7. Einstein's views on politics came from the same foundation as his thoughts on physics. He was all about logical thinking, following universal principles, and believed that humans were capable of becoming more morally conscious. Throughout his life, he dipped into the political world, often creating a bit of buzz, using his status as a top scientist to advocate for major social reforms. His political ideas were closely linked to his understanding of human nature, his sense of justice, and why societies should be structured in a certain way. Einstein identified himself as both a democratic socialist and a pacifist, although his views shifted over the years. He felt that capitalism naturally bred inequality, exploitation, and wars because it concentrated wealth and power with an elite few. In his view, nations fighting for resources and markets led to conflicts. He saw ending the private ownership of key industries as the only path to true peace and justice. Although this has a Marxist vibe, Einstein didn't fully buy into the Marxist belief that economic systems alone define everything about a society, or that communism would just naturally take over capitalism. To him, creating fair economic systems rooted in moral principles required active human effort. For Einstein, socialism was about choosing to do what's ethically right, rather than an unavoidable historical progression. In his 1949 essay, Why Socialism?, Einstein presented his take on socialism. He suggested that in a capitalist system, a tiny group of people ends up controlling production, media, and politics, making democracy corrupt and merely a facade. Power then serves these elite groups. Workers become commodified, isolated both from their work and each other. The answer was to make production a communal responsibility with planning that everyone in society participates in. Instead of letting markets dictate decisions, people would collectively decide what should be produced, focusing on real human needs. This would eliminate issues like unemployment and poverty, as well as capitalism's ups and downs, allowing individuals to pursue their full potential rather than just profit. Naturally, this raised significant questions, like who gets to decide what society needs and how to dodge a large, overreaching government. The Soviet Union claimed to be socialist, but turned into a dictatorship. Einstein acknowledged these significant hurdles and didn't offer concrete solutions to these problems. He rejected the Soviet method, which he believed merely swapped private bosses for party officials. True socialism, in his eyes, needed to embrace real democracy, freedoms, and local control. He often kept his descriptions broad, focusing more on moral imperatives than specific implementation details. Some critics thought he was overly idealistic, suggesting that having lofty goals without practical steps could lead to catastrophic failures, as evidenced by some communist regimes. The pursuit of democratic socialism, as Einstein envisioned, could be a tough job, and the attempt might result in greater oppression than the issues it sought to correct. Meanwhile, supporters insisted that a moral framework is essential, even without flawless planning. While Einstein clearly highlighted capitalism's flaws, whether his vision of socialism could actually work is a mystery, because no society has truly tried out his version of democratic socialism. Einstein's pacifist beliefs also sparked much debate as they evolved. At first, he was a staunch pacifist, opposing military service outright and strongly advocating for worldwide disarmament. As World War I started, he backed pacifist declarations and was critical of nationalism, dismissing it as just an old-fashioned brand of tribalism. He believed wars stemmed from irrational group thinking and could be resolved by teaching ethics and fostering international cooperation. Einstein's perspective on life was shaped by his cosmic view, which led him to believe that national borders and ethnic differences were meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe. He thought people should identify as humans first, instead of clinging to national or ethnic labels. To him, war appeared to be an act of insanity, with lives lost over concepts like national pride. However, Einstein's views took a turn with the Nazi regime's rise. By 1933, when Hitler seized control in Germany, the Nazis' ideology was deeply rooted in racism and military aggression. The brutal treatment of Jewish people, which ultimately led to genocide, forced Einstein to rethink his pacifist stance. Initially committed to peace, he realized that nonviolence couldn't combat such profound evil. After leaving Germany, surrendering his citizenship post-Hitler's ascension, Einstein saw military intervention as a necessity against the Nazis. He openly dismissed his previous anti-war beliefs, advocating for military preparation against fascism. This change troubled him, as it suggested that sometimes violence is unavoidable, and ideals can't always guide political decisions. Although he never returned to pure pacifism, he often regretted this shift, wishing that human logic could triumph over the impulse for war. Unfortunately, history disagreed. His moral quandary deepened with the advent of the atomic bomb. In 1939, when scientists discovered nuclear fission, unleashing unprecedented energy, refugee scientists from Nazi Germany feared Hitler might develop nuclear weapons. They persuaded Einstein to alert President Roosevelt about this danger, spurring the U.S. to begin its atomic bomb program. Einstein's involvement added significant credibility, fueling the Manhattan Project and the creation of atomic bombs. In 1945, when the U.S. used these bombs on Japan, it killed about 200,000 people, ending World War II. Einstein later lamented that signing the letter to Roosevelt was his greatest mistake, even though he grasped the threat posed by Nazi Germany back then. In the aftermath of the war, Einstein devoted himself to the cause of nuclear disarmament and advocated for a global government. He believed that in the atomic age, the concept of national sovereignty was outdated. Allowing countries to possess nuclear weapons could only lead to disaster, as human nature would likely drive one nation to use them eventually, endangering civilization. He proposed a world government with the sole authority over military might, particularly nuclear weapons, which would eliminate the need for national armies, downgrading them to mere police forces. International disputes would then be resolved legally rather than through conflict. For this vision to succeed, nations would need to concede some sovereignty to international entities, a proposal Einstein recognized would face backlash. Critics argued his ideas were overly idealistic and potentially risky, asserting that a global government preventing war could also become tyrannical. Concerns were raised about who would govern this body and how it would avoid turning into a dictatorship. Despite these fears, Einstein considered these risks less fatal than the menace of nuclear catastrophe. He suggested the global authority should have narrowly defined powers to prevent war, not control everything comprehensively. Democratic principles and constitutional checks would help avert tyranny. Yet, he provided few concrete details on how these institutions would actually function. Einstein's idea about having a world government delves into the complex philosophical challenges present in his political beliefs. He was a strong supporter of personal freedom and opposed authoritarian regimes. Yet, his advocacy for socialism and a global government implied granting significant power to shared institutions. How did he plan to prevent power from being abused? Einstein thought the key was in moral development and education that emphasized rational thinking. He believed that people could be taught to work together rather than being rivals, and to see themselves as part of the broader human race instead of aligning with smaller groups. For Einstein, creating fair institutions began with teaching people to value justice, centering on logic, empathy, and universal values. Nonetheless, when you take a look at historical events, his optimism might seem a bit questionable. Individuals have committed horrendous acts despite having received education and moral teachings. Possibly, our instincts to compete and segregate into groups are too deeply ingrained to be changed by reasoning alone. Evolutionary psychology suggests that these instincts aided our ancestors in survival by enabling them to compete for resources, prioritize their own groups, and be wary of outsiders. These adaptive strategies have presented significant challenges in today's globalized world, where nuclear capabilities and worldwide interconnectedness are the norms. Addressing them might require more than just moral education, potentially necessitating biological changes or enforced restrictions on human behavior. Yet, Einstein wasn't a proponent of the idea that our biology dictates everything. He acknowledged that aggression is part of human nature, but had a strong belief in culture and rationality's ability to curb it. He thought that human nature could be shaped such that different societies might cultivate vastly different behaviors. The actual challenge lay in crafting systems that highlight the best in people instead of their worst traits. Einstein's views on Zionism reveal these same complexities. He felt a strong connection to his Jewish heritage and was committed to the Jewish community's welfare, but he wasn't aligned with religious Judaism or Jewish nationalism. For him, establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine was a matter of necessity, offering a refuge for Jews who faced global persecution. However, he opposed the idea of an exclusively Jewish state with complete Jewish dominance. Rather, he envisioned a binational state where Jews and Arabs could share power equally. In his view, Jewish nationalism was just as harmful as the kind of narrow-mindedness he condemned across all belief systems. Viewing Arabs as foes or inferior was a betrayal of Jewish ethical teachings and would lead to unending conflict. True, enduring peace, according to Einstein, was achievable only through cooperation and mutual respect. This stance was at odds with most Zionist leaders of the era, who aspired for a state controlled by Jews. They considered Einstein's proposals naive, risking the Jewish people's hard-earned safety. Einstein countered by claiming that seeking security through dominance was illusory. Only justice could offer genuine protection. When Israel was established in 1948, Einstein accepted its existence but openly criticized its treatment of Arabs. He condemned territorial expansion, military actions targeting civilians, and laws discriminating against non-Jewish citizens. He notably turned down an offer to become Israel's second president in 1952, partly due to his disagreements with the state's policies. His consistent perspective reflected his universal principles. No ethnic or religious group should hold special rights over another. The horrors faced by Jews didn't justify inflicting similar suffering on Arabs. In his eyes, the appropriate response to past persecution wasn't Jewish supremacy, but societies built on equal rights for all. Critics argued that Einstein's universal outlook might have overlooked some political realities. Following centuries of persecution culminating in the Holocaust, founding a state for Jewish security and self-determination seemed morally necessary, despite its imperfections. His vision of a binational state might have been impractical, especially considering Arab opposition to any Jewish presence at the time. Fans of Einstein often say his ideas still make sense today. They suggest that part of the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Palestinians comes from seeing it as a clash of ethnic identities, Jews versus Arabs, rather than acknowledging it as a human rights issue. If only Einstein's belief in universal values and equal dignity for all had taken root earlier, perhaps years of violence might have been avoided. Einstein's political thoughts often danced between group identity and universal goals. He valued Jewish culture, but opposed the idea of prioritizing Jewish interests over others. He supported democratic socialism, yet critiqued the authoritarian nature of Soviet communism. He hoped for a world government, but feared global tyranny. These mixed feelings point to a tough question. Can universal values truly steer politics, or must leaders always juggle competing interests? Einstein firmly believed reason could uncover universal truths, things like equality, personal freedom, and working together as a society. He thought politics should aim for these ideals with the right systems in place. Yet, political realists argue that this overlooks the true nature of politics. It's really about who has power, how they got it, and how they wield it. While morals matter, they can't just sweep aside the hard facts about power. Navigating politics often requires strategic moves, compromises, and occasionally letting go of some principles. Einstein saw political realism as a bleak acceptance of the status quo. Sure, politics deals with power, but that power should serve justice, not just keep itself going. Separating power from morality, he warned, leads to a corrupted, tyrannical system. The challenge is to integrate moral values into politics while acknowledging the reality of power dynamics. Modern thinkers remain divided. John Rawls and others believe political systems should be founded on shared principles everyone could agree on, similar to what Einstein advocated. On the flip side, some critics say that such universal ideals ignore the deep influence of individual communities and traditions. Realists still hold that politics will inevitably dominate, regardless of moral aspirations. Einstein's political actions also stir debate about scientists in public life. Should they use their know-how to push political perspectives? Einstein thought they should, given their understanding of reason and the universe's interconnectedness. Science promotes clear thinking, challenges authority, and relies on evidence, which are all vital in politics. However, some argue that being good at science doesn't automatically qualify someone to tackle complex issues like economic policies or cultural tensions. Even so, Einstein's political outlook sometimes seemed too optimistic, overlooking the rough and tumble of real politics and the limitations of institutions. Being a scientific genius doesn't automatically make you a political expert. But his backers argue that Einstein's broad viewpoint, shaped by his scientific background, brought valuable insights to politics, even if he wasn't crafting policies himself. His cautions about nuclear weapons and nationalism struck a chord. His focus on universal human values remains persuasive, even if applying them politically is challenging. These questions are still relevant as more scientists wade into political debates about climate change, AI, and biotech. Should they just stick to the facts or also push for certain policies? Einstein's example suggests scientists should engage politically, especially when their expertise is crucial, while being conscious of their limits outside their field. Even if Einstein's direct political influence is mixed, his vision of democratic socialism didn't really take off, and capitalism is as robust as ever. His emphasis on universal human values still rings true. Einstein once hoped for a world government to come to life, but that vision never came to be, and nationalism is as powerful as it's ever been. He imagined a peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians, yet this vision was never realized, and their conflict continues today. Still, Einstein's political thoughts remain influential because of his push for universal human principles. He was convinced humanity could rise above petty loyalties, that rational thinking should steer political decisions, and that fairness should outweigh brute strength. Those with political dreams still turn to these ideas for inspiration. His viewpoint was kind of a balancing act between believing that everything's governed by natural laws and holding people accountable for what they do. He came from a physics background and thought the universe, and everyone in it, was ruled by these natural laws, right down to human actions. But he also believed that folks were responsible for their decisions and could make positive changes by using their brains and learning. Trying to make these ideas play nice took some heavy philosophical thinking, something Einstein didn't completely map out. Einstein was pretty sure human actions don't happen by chance. To him, what people do comes from things like their genes, their past, the world around them, and how their brains are wired, all working under nature's rule book. If someone had a grip on all these details, they could, at least in theory, predict what anyone was going to do. In Einstein's world, free will, like being able to pick another option in exactly the same situation, was sort of just wishful thinking. He talked about this view in his essay, The World as I See It. He flat out said, "I don't believe in free will," and often mentioned philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer's say, "A man can do what he wants, but he can't want what he wants." This line of thinking paints the whole determinism picture. It feels like we're making choices, but those choices come from stuff beyond our control. This was a belief reinforced by Einstein's scientific background. Physics describes everything as a series of events chained by mathematical rules, and humans aren't exempt from these rules. Our brains just follow these principles. So what we call decision-making is really just the brain doing its chemistry thing naturally. This way of thinking throws a curveball at the idea of moral responsibility. If people can't really pick between right or wrong because their paths are already laid out, then judging their choices seems kind of unjust. How can you punish someone if they couldn't do anything different? How can you praise if doing good was already a done deal? It's like moral systems are built on the shaky ground that we actually steer our decisions. To make sense of this, Einstein leaned on something called compatibilism. This idea tries to say that determinism and free will can live in harmony if we rethink what free will means. It isn't about being able to do different things in an identical situation. It's about acting on your own wants and reasoning without being forced by stuff inside or outside. Like, say one person robs a bank because they're greedy, but another does it because they're being threatened. Both actions might be set by past causes, but only the first person is acting freely in the sense that matters. They're acting from their own character. The second person doesn't have that freedom. They're pushed into it against their will. Compatibilists argue that this difference is key for responsibility. We judge when actions match a person's character and reason, but we cut slack when actions come from force, mental health issues, or compromised reasoning. The real kicker isn't whether they could have acted differently. Einstein liked this compatibilist angle, but found it tricky. He often wrote about feeling sorry for people who do bad things, seeing them as caught in a web of forces beyond their choosing. Like, if someone has a killer instinct, it might come from their genes or upbringing, things they didn't ask for. So, this understanding should foster empathy, not hatred. Einstein had this idea that society should both discipline wrongdoers and create frameworks that motivate good conduct. He didn't see punishment as a way to give criminals what they deserve, since, from his perspective, they couldn't have acted differently. Instead, he saw the point of punishment as a means to safeguard society and prevent future crimes. We hold people accountable not because they deserve blame in some deep moral sense, but because it nudges them toward better behavior. This way of thinking, where accountability is about its effects, lines up with a common way of thinking in today's philosophical and legal circles. We stick with using praise, blame, punishment, and rewards because they're effective, not due to some mysterious notion of free will. Yet, some argue that this view overlooks a crucial aspect of moral responsibility. When we blame someone for doing wrong, it's not only about modifying their future deeds. It affirms they've broken moral standards and deserve critique, implying they could have acted otherwise. But Einstein would call this belief an illusion, a misunderstanding of determinism. If we fully accepted that actions are determined, we'd stop wanting to punish wrongdoers just because they deserve it, while still supporting systems that promote positive behavior. The tricky part here is how human emotions fit into this outlook. Naturally, people feel angry at wrongdoing, grateful toward those who lend a hand, guilty for their own missteps, and proud of their accomplishments. These feelings seem vital for maintaining relationships and social balance. The question is whether we can keep these emotions while embracing the idea that everything is determined. Some philosophers argue it's not possible, suggesting that truly accepting determinism would strip away the emotions that make moral life meaningful. We might intellectually grasp why to hold others accountable, but without the emotional side, this accountability might lack weight. However, if you look at Einstein's personal life, it seems this concern might be overblown. Even with his belief in determinism, he still got worked up over injustices, felt compassion for the suffering, and accepted responsibility for his actions. He thought that understanding determinism should actually make us more compassionate, not less emotional. We can still have appropriate feelings about people's actions, acknowledging these actions are shaped by things beyond their control. Einstein's ethical views stretched beyond just individual responsibility. They also included social justice and how people connect with one another. He believed humans had innate abilities for both selfishness and kindness, competition and cooperation. Which of these wins out depends on the structures and values within society. Good societies nurture kindness and teamwork through education and fair systems. Some might say this clashes with determinism, suggesting everything, including education and institutions, is preordained and can't truly alter outcomes. But Einstein would counter that just because something is determined doesn't mean efforts to improve are futile. Our attempts to make society better are part of the causal chain. They're determined yet still bring about real changes. Just like knowing a ball will roll downhill doesn't negate the importance of the hill's shape. Similarly, saying social change is determined doesn't mean reform is futile. It's integral to how the future shapes up. Einstein's ethical beliefs sprang from what he called a cosmic religion, an idea he dug into more in Part 4, which highlights how feeling connected to something far greater than ourselves, the universe, naturally guides us toward ethical conduct. When we start to see ourselves as just a tiny part in the vastness of the universe, suddenly getting all caught up in our own desires seems kind of silly. Instead of just focusing on our own little bubble, we begin to consider the bigger picture. This mindset fits well with Buddhist teachings, which emphasize that everything is interconnected and constantly changing, encouraging us to look past our selfish ways. Albert Einstein, while not deeply involved with Buddhism, came to similar ideas through his work in physics and his philosophical musings. However, Some people debate whether viewing life from this huge cosmic perspective truly encourages ethical behavior. They wonder if realizing our insignificance might lead to a nothing really matters attitude. If nothing holds importance on a cosmic level, why bother being moral? Helping others might seem as insignificant as helping ants when you're thinking about the universe's vastness. But Einstein believed that understanding our place in the universe doesn't diminish human value. Instead, it helps us see everything in the right light. Although we're small in the grand scheme, we're also aware and thinking parts of it, capable of understanding and appreciating the whole picture. This awareness makes our existence special, even if it's just a tiny part of it. Being ethical means caring for these unique, conscious beings and supporting the communities they form. Einstein also thought that logic and reason naturally led to ethical actions. He argued that harming others is like hurting ourselves because of how interconnected we are. Acts of violence, injustice, and exploitation create chaos that eventually impacts everyone. Cooperating and helping each other generally leads to better outcomes for all involved. This idea aligns with social contract theories, which propose that what's personally beneficial is also morally right. However, challenges arise when what's best for an individual clashes with what's good for the whole group. Those tricky free rider problems surface when some people benefit without contributing their fair share. Some clever folks might try to benefit from others' efforts while slacking off themselves. Without some form of punishment or ethics beyond self-interest, cooperation can break down. Einstein recognized these issues, but believed that a well-considered self-interest, aware of the long-term and indirect impacts of our actions, supports cooperation. In addition, humans have evolved traits like empathy and a sense of fairness that reach beyond self-centered interests, making genuine morality possible, not just strategic alliances. Today, researchers in moral psychology partly support this view. Humans naturally have gut feelings about fairness, harm, and cooperation that evolved because they boosted survival in groups. Yet, these instincts can be narrow, often prioritizing our own group over others, and can be overridden by selfish desires or strong beliefs. Einstein hoped that through education and rational thought, these moral instincts could become universal instead of tribal. Yet, teaching morality doesn't always lead to people consistently doing the right thing, and at times, reason bends to serve personal interests rather than control them. Nevertheless, giving up on moral development doesn't offer a better path. Alternatives like believing everything's relative or that nothing matters seem to abandon any hope of ethical progress. Einstein believed in the power of simplicity, honesty, and staying true to oneself despite what society might demand. Even after he became a global icon, he lived modestly, avoided the race for money, and wasn't afraid to question authority when he thought it was wrong. For him, living ethically meant staying faithful to your core values. This idea of being authentic may seem to clash with his belief in predestined lives. If everything's set in stone, what's authenticity all about? Is it just about embracing what we're meant to be anyway? Einstein might have said that true authenticity lies in choosing based on real values and thought-out decisions, rather than just following what others want or pursuing empty desires. Even if our values are somehow already set for us, choosing to live by them feels different from doing things just because we feel pressured from outside forces. There's a real impact in feeling aligned with who you are, even if destiny is in play. Ethics was hugely important to Einstein, and he warned against getting wrapped up in personal issues like reputation, career triumphs, or social position, because these can steer you away from the bigger picture, learning, creating, and making a real difference. He likened the chase for fame and recognition to living like a pig, believing it wastes what humans can truly accomplish. Einstein's way of thinking ties into a kind of cosmic religion. When you view things from this cosmic angle, personal achievements are mere moments that don't hold much weight. It's more about contributing to the broader quest for human progress and understanding. Sure, people might point out that with his fame, Einstein used his influence to push for causes he was passionate about, suggesting maybe he wasn't entirely above personal interest. Plus, completely divorcing personal interest might be impossible and not ideal, as they're often what make us happy and fulfilled. Personal achievements, bonds, and projects can be what make life exciting and meaningful for many folks. Einstein likely saw a distinction between healthy engagement in personal endeavors and being consumed by what others think of you or always comparing yourself to them. It's okay to care about your work and relationships just as long as you don't let status concerns run your life. Seeing things from a cosmic perspective helps keep personal worries from overshadowing everything. Einstein's thoughts on ethics are still relevant today, especially when we talk about responsibility in neuroscience and the justice system. New studies show some bad behavior links to brain issues, hinting our actions might be driven by factors we can't control. This brings us back to Einstein's big question: how do we handle wrongdoing when it's wired into someone's brain? Some brain experts say we should ditch retributive punishment and focus instead on rehabilitation and safety, which fits with Einstein's idea that consequences matter more than blame. However, some worry that without punishing wrongs, society might overlook the importance of calling out bad actions. Einstein might suggest that while it's important to hold people accountable because it serves a societal purpose, we should do so with more kindness and less severity. Understanding that people's actions often result from factors beyond their control should coexist with maintaining accountability to encourage positive behavior and protect others. His thoughts are quite relevant to today's conversations about inequality and the whole merit-based system. If everything, even our best efforts, are influenced by things like genetics and upbringing that we don't choose, our successes might be more about luck than actual merit. Einstein would likely question the idea of meritocracy, pushing for a more equitable distribution of wealth. Successful individuals should feel grateful for their good fortune rather than brag about their prowess, while those who are less fortunate should get empathy and support, not judgment. Still, some people worry that eliminating merit-based rewards might kill the drive to work hard and innovate. Even if we understand that achievements are predetermined, rewarding effort and accomplishments might still be more effective than just labeling them as luck. Einstein might argue that we can maintain these reward systems while also acknowledging their philosophical limits. Success is rewarded not because people inherently deserve it, but because it incentivizes them to engage in valuable activities. Seeing it in this light can help us embrace the idea of assisting those who haven't had as much success. It's not because they're lacking in some way. They simply haven't had the same stroke of luck. Part 9. Nobody hits the bullseye every time, not even the legendary Albert Einstein. Yes, he made a few blunders, which actually tell us a lot about the reach of his brilliance and where it hit a wall. Taking a closer look at Einstein's mistakes gives us insight into the potential pitfalls of his unique way of thinking, specifically the risks of letting personal philosophy overshadow solid evidence, and shows how even a genius's approaches can be limited by both their personality and the era they're in. Some of these errors stuck out like a sore thumb, while others were sneaky but still crucial. Each one provides a lesson in the advancement of science and the common humanity of making mistakes. One of his biggest slip-ups was dismissing quantum mechanics. As we covered back in Part 3, Einstein spent around 30 years arguing that quantum mechanics was somehow incomplete because it clashed with his views on realism, determinism, and locality. Turns out, quantum mechanics has held up under every test thrown at it, while his alternate ideas didn't make the cut. Bell's theorem even ruled out the kind of local hidden variable theories Einstein had hoped for. This mistake arose from prioritizing his philosophical leanings over the hard evidence. Quantum mechanics made accurate predictions right from the beginning, but instead of adopting the findings and revising his thinking, Einstein held on to the belief that any theory conflicting with his principles had to be flawed. It was a methodological blunder, letting his beliefs interfere with experimental reality. But it wasn't just about him being stubborn. His critiques actually motivated supporters of quantum mechanics to clarify their interpretations and deal with issues they might have otherwise skipped. The EPR paper, even though it aimed to highlight the problems in quantum mechanics, ultimately led to Bell's theorem and further experiments, deepening our understanding. Sometimes, a captivating mistake can drive scientific progress more than just getting it right off the bat. Then, there's the tale of Einstein's cosmological constant. When he applied his general relativity theories to the universe in 1917, his calculations suggested it should be either expanding or contracting, which clashed with the then popular notion of a steady, unchanging universe. Instead of embracing this groundbreaking insight, he introduced the cosmological constant to force his math to align with a static universe. But in 1929, Edwin Hubble discovered that, in fact, the universe was expanding, exactly as Einstein's original equations had implied. Later, Einstein ruefully called adding the constant his biggest blunder, realizing he missed the chance to predict cosmic expansion before anyone else. Yet, ironically, modern science revisited the cosmological constant to explain dark energy, the mysterious force driving the universe's accelerated expansion. So, even Einstein's mistakes ended up leading to real phenomena, even if for the wrong reasons. This twist shows how scientific discovery isn't all about right or wrong, but a journey with surprising truths along the way. It also highlights Einstein's habit of tweaking theories to mirror his philosophical views over actual evidence. He preferred a universe that was constant and eternal because it made more intuitive sense to him than one with a beginning or an end. This aesthetic preference, just like his rejection of quantum mechanics, demonstrates the risks of letting personal beliefs outweigh what the equations actually showed. A subtler misjudgment was Einstein's early inability to appreciate the revolutionary nature of quantum mechanics. In 1905, he introduced the idea of photons, suggesting that light can behave like bundles, or quanta, of energy. but he saw it mainly as a computational convenience rather than a huge shift in understanding nature itself. He didn't quite grasp that quantum behavior was not just a peculiar anomaly waiting to be explained away, but signaled a new realm of physics that required an entirely fresh set of concepts. It's no shocker that people can overlook the big picture when diving into the wild concepts of quantum mechanics. Even Einstein, the guy who flipped Newton's physics on its head, had a hard time wrapping his brain around the idea that these quantum theories might mean rethinking his own beloved concepts. During the last 3 decades of his life, he poured his energy into chasing a unified field theory, but never managed to find anything testable. Many think this was a massive mistake, channeling all that genius into a roadblock by ignoring quantum mechanics. It's a perfect example of how getting lost in theoretical math without real-world checks can lead you astray. When Einstein nailed relativity, he was solving real puzzles with thought experiments grounded in observable reality. On the flip side, his attempt to unify fields was more like a quest in mathematical philosophy, banking on the idea that pretty equations could unveil the universe's mysteries. Critics argue he should have noticed it wasn't working and redirected his efforts. By the 1930s, quantum mechanics was the rising star, and Einstein found himself drifting from the main physics current. He could have focused on other areas where his brilliance might shine. Instead, he stuck with a project most already thought was a lost cause. Yet, some back him up, saying it was his gamble with long shots that paid off with relativity, so there was no way to know his new pursuit wouldn't work out. Although he didn't meet his goal, the audaciousness of the attempt speaks volumes. Science often progresses from such bold moves, even when they don't hit the target. In Part 7, Einstein's political views are looked into, showing a kind of innocence. His idea for a global government didn't address practical concerns like avoiding despotism or gaining legitimacy. While he supported democratic socialism, he left a lot of blanks on how it might function, particularly when examples like Soviet communism were tanking. His hopeful belief that education and reason could lead people beyond nationalism and war didn't fully hold up. These oversights stem from his broad perspective, which offered clear moral insights but glossed over the messy realities of politics. From a cosmic view, drawing borders seems ridiculous, and war appears absurd. But politics play out in the gritty human world, with strong identities and fears in the mix. Einstein, focused on what could be, sometimes missed the real dynamics in societies and human nature itself. His personal life also cut a complex figure, despite his deep philosophical insights. He didn't treat his first wife, Mileva, well during their marriage and separation. His aloofness and career often came before family responsibilities. He had affairs while in the marriage, and his relationships with his kids were strained, particularly with his son Edward, who battled schizophrenia. Even with his compassion and determinism views, he struggled to apply them in his closest relationships. This gap between knowing what's right and acting on it is a challenge even for the brightest minds, be they moral thinkers or brilliant scientists. Some critics say these personal failings ding his moral standing. Can we really heed the advice of someone who didn't always live by it? Others argue that messing up is just a part of being human, and it doesn't lessen the worth of honest moral guidance. In fact, Einstein's slip-ups make him more human and relatable, helping us connect with his insights rather than diminishing their significance. Back in his day, Einstein was pretty progressive when it came to tackling racism, using his celebrity status to challenge discrimination and support African Americans facing prejudice. However, his personal diaries show some views that don't quite align with today's standards. He made comments about Asians, particularly the Chinese, that leaned on stereotypes. Einstein saw them as culturally inferior, but also admired certain aspects of Chinese culture. This contradiction highlights that even Einstein, committed as he was to equality, wasn't completely free of biases of his time. He did manage to rise above much of the racism in early 20th century Europe, yet some of it lingered on. This shows us that moral growth isn't overnight, and often we only recognize our shortcomings when we look back later. Einstein believed the universe followed a kind of mathematical beauty, which was helpful when he developed relativity. But it didn't quite work out when he explored quantum mechanics and unified field theory. He figured everything in the universe was understandable through human logic, but that might not be true. The natural world might be messier than he thought. Nowadays, the idea of the universe being less orderly gets more attention in physics. While the Standard Model is accurate experimentally, it's not aesthetically neat and has these awkward parts that don't fit smoothly. String theory tried to tidy things up, but so far it hasn't delivered anything verifiable. Maybe, deep down, nature isn't as organized as we'd like. Einstein's reliance on logic and math over direct experimentation was a hit with relativity, but didn't always work when applied again and again. This indicates that science isn't a one-size-fits-all endeavor. Different scientific puzzles might need various approaches. Sometimes number crunching works, like with relativity, but it might not get us anywhere else, as seen in his unified field theory efforts. Deciding the right path requires insight that can't just be taught or made into a formula. Einstein wasn't thrilled about randomness or probability, not just in quantum mechanics, but across his thoughts. Even though he reluctantly admitted thermodynamics involved probabilities, he hoped they were just temporary placeholders for gaps in knowledge rather than inherent parts of nature. He was really set against the idea of randomness as an intrinsic part of physics. But reality disagreed with him. Things like quantum mechanics and chaos theory proved unpredictability was unavoidable. His determination toward determinism meant he undervalued how significant consciousness could be and the difficulty of understanding subjective experiences. He saw consciousness as a byproduct of physical processes without much impact. Philosophical debates regarding the mind or deeper psychological inquiries didn't really capture his interest beyond basic ideas. The current discussions about consciousness, its essence, and if science can fully explain our inner experiences didn't draw him in. This is a notable gap in Einstein's thinking. Consciousness undeniably plays a big role in our existence, but his perspective didn't fit it comfortably. Whether he missed something or consciousness study was just immature is still debated. But he didn't offer concrete solutions. Einstein's vision of an improved world, despite its noble goals, sometimes missed the mark on appreciating cultural differences. He had a strong belief in a universal humanity driven by logic, which occasionally made it seem like cultural variations were minor or even ignorable. These days, society really admires the unique knowledge that different cultures bring to the table, emphasizing their value instead of trying to blend them into a one-size-fits-all approach. If we were to guess what Einstein might think, he'd probably support the idea that respecting cultural diversity is possible while still holding on to universal principles like dignity, freedom, and well-being that transcend cultural lines. The challenge, though, is to make sure this appreciation for multiculturalism doesn't turn into cultural dominance or leave us morally uncertain. Although Einstein touched on how we could manage this, he never fully developed those thoughts. In his view, science had the potential to liberate us morally and politically. Yet that wasn't the whole story. Indeed, science has propelled progress, but it's also led to environmental damage, weapons of mass destruction, and surveillance technologies. Just because someone thinks scientifically doesn't mean they automatically become ethically wise or prevent the misuse of scientific advancements. Toward the end of his life, Einstein became aware of this, especially with the advent of nuclear weapons, but his generally optimistic belief in science as a driver of human progress needed more conditions than he initially included. Einstein's concept of a cosmic religion, while intellectually rich, perhaps falls short in addressing human suffering, loss, and injustice. Traditional religions offer comfort through beliefs in transcendence, purpose in suffering, and ultimate justice. In contrast, Einstein's idea of God, similar to Spinoza's, provides only the cold assurance that things unfold according to natural laws. For those experiencing difficulties, that's not much comfort. Einstein might argue that it's better to confront a tough reality than to take shelter in comforting illusions. But this assumes that traditional religious beliefs are false, which he couldn't prove, and that his views were correct, even though they were challenged by quantum mechanics. At best, his cosmic faith might do well in explaining the universe, but isn't as effective in dealing with human struggles. These shortcomings, however, don't detract from Einstein's remarkable achievements. Every brilliant mind is influenced by the times, personal traits, and intellectual boundaries. The errors Einstein made show the human aspect of this iconic figure, a man who faced difficulties, made mistakes, yet persevered. His willingness to acknowledge his mistakes in the pursuit of truth captures the essence of scientific exploration, maybe even more than his numerous successes. Part 10. All right, so here's what's going on. People are still deep into picking apart Einstein's theories, his current view of the world. These debates aren't just academic exercises. They're actively shaping research, education, and our broader understanding of science. Over the years, Einstein has become more than just a historical figure. He's a battleground of sorts, with different camps trying to use his legacy to back up their diverse viewpoints. In the physics arena, a huge ongoing debate centers around whether Einstein's belief in a realistic and deterministic interpretation of quantum mechanics will eventually be proven true. The majority of physicists tend to side with the Copenhagen or instrumentalist perspective, seeing quantum mechanics as a tool to predict measurements while setting aside what's actually happening on a deeper level. However, there's a growing number of physicists who are still following Einstein's vision of finding more foundational theories that fit a classical understanding. This group is gaining traction recently, partly because there are indications that maybe quantum mechanics isn't the final word. The problem of measurement still looms unanswered, and when we try to integrate gravity with quantum mechanics, things get seriously complicated, suggesting we need a fundamental shift in our thinking. Some scientists propose that quantum mechanics might be an incredibly precise temporary fix, accurate within its realm, but not the end game, similar to how thermodynamics isn't the full picture. Today's Einstein enthusiasts are diving into ideas like objective collapse models, which incorporate true randomness, or pilot wave theories that reintroduce determinism, even if it means embracing non-locality. They argue that Einstein was on the right path in seeking theories independent of human observation, even though his methods didn't yield the desired results. Detractors counter that, given the numerous experimental confirmations, it's hard to deny the robustness of quantum mechanics. For them, clinging to older theories is less about science and more about preserving a familiar worldview. They suggest embracing the oddness that quantum mechanics presents instead of holding on to obsolete classical models. This discussion might only find resolution, if at all, when we unlock the secrets of quantum gravity. If that theory revives a classical view of space-time at its core, it could vindicate Einstein's instincts. However, if quantum processes are fundamental with space-time as a byproduct, then the Copenhagen viewpoint gains credence. As of now, the jury's still out. On the philosophical front, Einstein is central to the ongoing debate over scientific realism. Scientific realists argue that effective theories likely offer a decent portrayal of unseen elements like electrons, the curving of space-time, and the tangibility of quantum fields. Meanwhile, anti-realists treat theories as practical frameworks for understanding experiences and making predictions, asserting that discerning the truth about the unobservable is either unfeasible or not worth the effort. Interestingly, Einstein ends up supporting both sides. Realists appreciate his goal for physics to describe an objective reality, free of observers. Anti-realists note his focus on practical implications in situations like simultaneity in special relativity, which is more about measurements than intrinsic reality. This ambiguity in Einstein's own beliefs lets both sides cite him in their arguments. Contemporary philosophers like Bas van Fraassen champion anti-realism with reasoning that Einstein might not have endorsed, even while using his concepts. Others, such as Richard Boyd, uphold realism by invoking Einstein's later thoughts on the need for a realistic take on quantum mechanics. This conversation really highlights how spot-on Einstein was when he dived into these big topics that we're still wrestling with today. Presentists argue that just because simultaneity is relative doesn't mean the past and future hold the same reality as the present. Instead, it means what we see as now is fluid, depending on who's observing. They've developed various theories to keep the focus on the present, all while acknowledging relativity. On the other hand, eternalists say presentists sneak an absolute now into their arguments and claim that relativity suggests we should abandon the idea that only the present exists. This debate seeps into the realm of physics, especially within theories about quantum gravity. Some experts suggest time might not be a fundamental component of reality. If that's true, presentism and eternalism may just be products of our limited perspective. We also face the mystery of the arrow of time. While physics laws are mostly symmetrical, meaning they don't favor any time direction, we surely experience time as moving from past to future. Ideas on this range from conditions set when the universe was born, to consciousness itself bending time's flow, to considering that time symmetry might be less perfect than we thought. Right now, there's no consensus on what's behind this. Einstein's thought process still fuels heated debates in the philosophy of science, especially about deciding between theories that predict the same outcomes but rest on different assumptions. Einstein leaned toward simplicity, integration, and profound explanations in choosing among theories. Some say these are just subjective tastes, not trustworthy indicators of truth. The ongoing string theory versus quantum gravity dialogue mirrors this, with string theorists claiming the elegance and unifying nature of their theory suggests its truth, even without solid experimental evidence. Critics argue that depending on elegance is misleading and stress the necessity of experimental proof. Both camps invoke Einstein, with string theorists highlighting his success with relativity, while skeptics point to his failed attempts at creating a unified field theory. Looking at cosmology, Einstein's ideas still support modern theories about the universe's nature and beginnings, leading to concepts like the Big Bang, the universe's expansion, and black holes. Nonetheless, some recent findings hint that the universe might not be as orderly as he envisioned. This connects to the multiverse theory, suggesting a vast number of universes with distinct rules, implying we exist in one capable of supporting life simply because there's no other way we could witness it. For many physicists, this idea is unsettling, clashing with Einstein's conviction that physics should explain our specific universe's laws, not just present our universe as one of many possibilities. Though it may cause unease, supporters argue that keeping an open mind to unexpected outcomes is part of embracing successful theories. This backs up memories of old disputes over quantum mechanics, especially concerning whether physics has to be philosophically sensible or if it just needs to align with the data. Beyond the scientific realm, Einstein's thoughts still resonate in current political debates, touching on subjects like democracy and socialism. Folks who lean to the left often focus on Einstein's views as a democratic socialist, pointing out how he called attention to capitalism's downsides. But there are those who argue he didn't spell out exactly how socialism could be put into practice without ending up in a situation where power is abused, which has been an issue in some past attempts. There's been a lot of back and forth over the years about whether democratic socialism is feasible or if it inevitably gravitates towards authoritarianism, with Einstein frequently being part of these conversations. Einstein championed the idea of a global government, and this thinking plays into today's discussions on globalism and the notion of cosmopolitanism. When people discuss boosting international coalitions, working collectively to combat climate change, or reining in nationalism, they're often reflecting Einstein's broad ideas. However, not everyone agrees with a global government. Some critics argue it could suppress individual freedoms and posit that national sovereignty remains a bulwark against despotism. So, while Einstein's ideas continue to influence these debates, they aren't seen as the absolute answer. When we talk about the role of science in society, Einstein often comes up as a scientist deeply engaged with societal issues, leveraging his influence to champion progressive causes. A good chunk of people find this inspiring, thinking scientists should actively engage in social matters. On the flip side, some point to Einstein's forays outside his area of expertise as a cautionary tale. At times, his political thoughts were considered naive, magnified by his fame. We see a similar push and pull today with scientists who voice opinions on things like addressing climate change, regulation of artificial intelligence, or biotech policy. The debate continues. Should scientists just present the facts and leave it at that, or should they advocate for particular policies? Both supporters and skeptics of active scientific engagement often refer back to Einstein, either as a shining example of responsible public involvement or a warning against stepping too far afield. Einstein's take on determinism also feeds into current discussions on neuroscience and the justice system. As we gain insights into how the brain influences behavior, big questions about free will and moral accountability re-emerge, topics Einstein deeply pondered. He saw the potential for moral accountability even within determinism by concentrating on results rather than simply punishment. This mindset encourages reforms shifting from pure punishment to focusing on rehabilitation. Some worry that embracing determinism over punishment might mess up society's moral signals and fail to adequately address severe wrongdoing. Yet, proponents believe that Einstein's emphasis on outcomes offers a balanced way of holding people accountable while ensuring fairer treatment within the criminal justice framework. In education, Einstein's emphasis on creativity, intuition, and independent thought has left a significant mark on how many educators view teaching today. Numerous reformers look to Einstein to bolster arguments against relying on rote memorization and standardized testing, instead promoting an environment that nurtures curiosity, imagination, and a deep understanding of concepts. Critics, however, contend that Einstein was in a league of his own and that most students thrive with more traditional, structured learning strategies. This debate can sometimes get caught up in the mythos of Einstein rather than his actual beliefs. While he wasn't a fan of authoritarian educational approaches, he did see the importance of strong foundational skills. To him, imagination and disciplined reasoning were meant to complement one another, a nuance sometimes missed in today's educational debates. Einstein's views on religion still ignite plenty of debate. Atheists often see him as one of their own because he rejected superstition and leaned toward scientific reasoning. On the flip side, religious folks point to the way he talked about God and his sense of wonder for the universe to argue that science and spirituality can go hand in hand. Both groups find pieces of his writings to back their arguments, but they tend to overlook the full complexity of what he believed. The ongoing discussions about the mix of science and religion frequently throw Einstein's name into the mix without really digging into his actual thoughts. Some individuals, like Richard Dawkins, focus on how Einstein dismissed the idea of a personal God. In contrast, others like Francis Collins highlight his spiritual language and awe for nature. But neither fully captures his Spinozistic pantheism, which doesn't quite fit into the typical science versus religion debate. In popular culture, Einstein's become a symbol whose meaning shifts depending on the situation. Yes, he's a genius icon, but he's also seen as someone a little eccentric, a figure of social awareness, a representative of Jewish heritage, proof of successful German-American immigration, a creative scientific mind, and the classic absent-minded professor type. The well-known image of Einstein often strays far from the real person, creating a myth that shapes public perception of science and scientists. Experts are split on whether this myth helps or hinders people's understanding of science. On one hand, it gives a friendly face to complicated science topics, making fields like physics more relatable. On the other hand, it might lead to misleading hero worship and a distorted view of how science works, focusing more on the lone genius rather than teamwork. When it comes to where Einstein fits in today's world, experts have plenty to discuss. Some think his ideas are still at the cutting edge of scientific exploration. Quantum mechanics, scientific interpretations, the quest for a unified theory, and questions about the universe all trace back to paths Einstein paved. His thoughts on realism, rationality, and the universe's comprehensibility still guide much of theoretical physics. However, some argue that his framework has been overshadowed by new scientific concepts. Quantum mechanics show that traditional ideas about reality aren't holding up. Modern physics often sticks with mathematical formalism without demanding easy-to-understand physical concepts. Theories like string theory, embracing abstract ideas Einstein likely wouldn't have accepted, take center stage today. So, his ongoing influence might be more about historical significance than current cutting-edge contributions. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Einstein's specific theories still hold strong. Special and general relativity form the backbone of contemporary physics, continuously tested and relied upon. His broader philosophical approach, emphasizing unity, elegance, and rational thought, continues to inspire some researchers, while others pursue more empiricist or instrumentalist pathways. Perhaps the most profound part of Einstein's legacy is showing that physics can be revolutionary. Before him, physics seemed mostly settled, just needing minor adjustments. He proved that once unquestioned ideas, like absolute time and flat space, could be contested, that math could overturn established scientific beliefs, and that merging different phenomena was possible. Einstein sparked a kind of revolution that still drives physicists to think outside the box and search for groundbreaking alternatives. Yet his missteps also teach us something important. Sometimes thinking differently leads to amazing discoveries, and sometimes it ends in a dead end. Relying on beautiful theories and slick math often works wonders, until it doesn't. Philosophical ideas can inspire great ideas or make us overlook real findings that don't fit our beliefs. The debates about Einstein reflect bigger questions about what science is really about. Is physics there to explain what's real, or just to make accurate guesses? Should we judge theories by how well they perform, or do their other qualities matter too? Can we fully grasp nature, or is there a limit to what we can understand? Einstein had strong opinions on these, and his wins and losses fuel all sides of these debates. His theory of relativity proved that deep thinking can uncover real truths. But him brushing aside quantum mechanics shows how philosophical ideas can make us miss big discoveries. His try at a unified field theory reminds us that pretty math isn't everything. His lasting impact proves the need to ask fundamental questions, even when answers seem just out of reach. As science moves forward, it will keep reshaping Einstein's legacy. If quantum gravity ends up fitting classical space-time into a bigger picture, then Einstein's belief in realism gets a boost. But if quantum mechanics remains central without any deeper certainty, then the Copenhagen interpretation takes the win. If a unified theory is found, it would support Einstein's strong belief in unity, despite him not getting there himself. But if physics never fully connects its different parts, then Nancy Cartwright's patchwork approach would be the winner. One thing's for sure, though. Einstein forever changed how we see reality and our part in it. His theories make us ponder huge questions we can't ignore about time, causality, determinism, what we know, and human choices. People will keep discussing his role because he touched on issues at the heart of understanding the universe and ourselves. Maybe Einstein's biggest gift wasn't the solutions, which are still debated, but the questions that show us how much we still don't know, despite all we've learned. In the end, Einstein was the essence of science: endless curiosity, bold thinking, challenging norms, and chasing truth, no matter what. He truly believed the universe could be understood, that humanity could unlock its deep secrets, and that this knowledge was valuable on its own. This belief continues to inspire scientists and thinkers even today. Even though we don't know for sure if this belief will pan out, the quest to answer Einstein's questions, to see what he could see, and to explore deeper keeps science moving forward into unknown territories where new discoveries might be waiting.